Okay, good morning, Council. Let me count up and see how many we have. We're missing somebody.
Jason?
No, there, just Jason. There he is. Okay, good morning, Council staff and invited guests. I would like to call the meeting to order, and I can confirm that we have quorum and everyone is present. This morning, we are going to call on Councillor Wiebe to read the land acknowledgement statement.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations.
Thank you. As usual, the clerks have assigned movers and seconders for all of our motions. So if anybody has a problem with any of them when we get to them, just let me know that. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald that is recommended that the General Committee meeting agenda dated Wednesday, May 26, 2021 be adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? That carries. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to invited presentations, which we don't have any of. But we do have 4 deputations. And I will remind all of our guests that we have a 10-minute limit on deputations. And the first one is Lanny Dennis from Wayne Simpson and Associates for a license of occupation at 40 Falls View Road. Lanny?
Sure.
Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee, council. Lanny Dennis, Wayne Simpson and Associates, represent the owner, Mr. Roland Ostrup. Just with respect to the application, I certainly understand staff's position. However, I think license of occupation is appropriate in this instance. I think it's a fairly straightforward, simple request to recognize an existing dock. Generally, the merits of the proposal, without issue, over the past, the dock has been used by past and present owners for over 40 years, and there has been no issue with respect to using the dock. It is immediately adjacent to 40 Falls View Drive, where the applicant resides. It's been maintained privately for the past 40 years by present and past owners. There's an existing encroachment / license of occupation agreement on title, or not on title, that the town has in their records that permits the existing dock, albeit the new dock the existing dock was slightly larger. Over the years, and I think there was in 2003, there was a land swap with the present owners with the town, and part of the application was to more functionally allow 40 Falls View Drive the opportunity to utilize the existing dock. I think that the destination, this is not really a public destination per se. I think that if anybody comes to this area, the destination is the falls, and certainly not to utilize the public road allowance at this location. There's no beach, and it's certainly not real conducive to boat launching. Nobody sort of utilizes, and anecdotal observations by the owner, this side of the bay, if you will, above the falls, only maybe perhaps for parking. So in short, I think that the license of occupation in this instance is appropriate, and certainly the town has the ability to collect a yearly fee, and of course the license in the future, if they have larger scale plans come forward, could be terminated. And so I'd respectfully request that committee approve the application for the license of occupation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lanny. This is further down on our agenda. I'm going to guess it's probably at least an hour and a half away, but so that you don't have to hang around that long. Is there any questions from council to Lanny before we move on? Councillor Stone.
I don't know if it's to Lanny or to staff, but how does last night's resolution pertain to this?
We do have it on the agenda, and we are treating it as a previous application. Okay, thanks, Lanny. Don't feel you have to hang around. We will notify you of the decision.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, committee. Have a great meeting.
Okay, our second deputation from Climate Action Muskoka, Leslie Hasty, Sue McKenzie, and Linda Mathers. And I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation.
This is correct. Your Worship, Council. May I share the screen, please?
Thank you.
We ask you to declare a climate emergency. Just to introduce ourselves, I live in Huntsville and I'm a member of Climate Action Muskoka, as are my colleagues here today, Sue McKenzie and Linda Matthews, who co-authored this climate emergency resolution before you. They did so working with District of Muskoka staff, and in particular, Christy Doyle and Kevin Boyle. It's essentially the same resolution passed by Gravenhurst last month and by the district in December. And it'll be presented to other Muskoka councils in the next few weeks. This joint determination will enable collaboration between municipalities and the district to maximize resources and to harmonize actions and strategies between you all. We ask you to declare a climate emergency, to set the targets. 50% cut in greenhouse gases by 2030, net zero emissions by 2050. Scientists calculated that if climate heating is to remain at 1.5 Celsius, there is a finite, a limited amount of carbon dioxide that can be emitted into the atmosphere before 2030. This is called the carbon budget, as you probably know. If we are to use up only this limited carbon budget, these particular emission targets are essential. They are those agreed in Paris, and they are scientifically non-negotiable if heating is to be kept to this maximum 1.5 degree increase. Kevin Boyle recognized the science that shows that these targets are the bare minimum we must achieve. How to reach the targets: create a plan to meet those targets. This plan cannot be created today or even this year. It'll evolve over decades as new technologies, new investment, and new scientific information become available. Put climate action at the forefront of all decision-making. Recognize that you are not alone in the task of meeting these targets. You have community support. The time is now. The 2018 IPCC report on climate gave the world 11 years to act to keep global heating to 1.5 Celsius. Now in 2021, we have less than 9 years. This crisis has created opportunities and exposed the means to innovate, to find better ways of doing things. We have demonstrated our incredible ability to act, adapt, to take action, most recently during the pandemic and historically during World War II. Let's apply that realization to our greatest existential threat and join over 10,000 cities and municipalities around the world that have adapted meaningful greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. Why is this an emergency? An emergency is a critical event requiring immediate action. Irrefutable science says we're on track for more catastrophic heating. Due to heating. Municipalities will bear the economic, social, environmental burden, and failure to address this emergency now, according to the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, will cost at least 6 times more later. Think forest fires, drought, extreme heat waves, flooding, hurricanes. What will a declaration of a climate emergency do? It will communicate the urgency to the public, demonstrate leadership and responsibility, provide direction and support for staff in planning ambitious action, adding strong climate-specific language to the strategic plan, and recognize opportunities, co-benefits to health, economic growth, halt ecosystem collapse, etc. Who is asking you to declare a climate emergency? Our community, represented by Climate Action Muskoka. CAM represents a cross-section of business leaders, teachers, students, policy analysts, union reps, public servants, parents, children, teachers, grandparents, community members deeply concerned about taking action to reduce the impacts of the climate crisis. We have come together to turn hopelessness into action. We have many community endorsers, 200 individuals, 50 businesses. We have lake associations, farmers, businesses, and including the Muskoka Watershed Council, whose reason for endorsing this was that climate change is unparalleled in terms of its scientific certainty because of the scale of the impacts and because of the required urgency for action. The time for doing what we can has passed. Each of us must now do what is necessary. Christiana Figueres, credited with achieving the Paris Agreement. Here's the resolution to declare and act on the climate emergency, and I'll summarize the first part. The world is currently on track for more than 3-degree increase in temperature based on policies that are now in place. We have less than 10 years to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And many municipalities understand the major benefits of and the need to be at the forefront of action on climate change. Financial damage associated with climate change will come from impacts to municipal core infrastructure. It's necessary to increase community resilience in the face of climate change. Many people in Muskoka have demonstrated a strong interest and commitment to address climate change. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Huntsville officially declare a climate emergency immediately and join other municipalities to name and deepen the town of Huntsville's commitment to protecting our economy, our community, and our ecosystems from the impact of climate heating, and develop a climate action plan, CAP, to reduce corporate and community greenhouse gas emissions. The CAP would include identification of firm, ambitious targets to reach the goal of greater than 50% reduction of gases by 2030 and achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Commit to becoming a drawdown regenerative economy. Sorry, I keep having to move these pictures around. Taking an active role in the repair and degeneration of our systems, including in the areas of the built environment, natural infrastructure, land use, transportation, energy, health, and food security, and support and participate in the establishment of a community climate working group, which will provide the Huntsville which will provide input to Huntsville and assist in the regular review and updating of the CAP as the science evolves. The Community Climate Working Group should be representative of the diversity of the community of the town of Huntsville and will include at least one councillor who will act as liaison with the council and collaborate with the District of Muskoka, other municipal governments, institutions, industry associations, and the community to improve standards and protocol that can positively address climate adaptation and mitigation, seek and secure funding opportunities from internal and external sources for 2021 and beyond to adequately finance climate actions necessary to meet 2030 and 2050 emission reduction targets. Commit to putting climate action at the forefront of all decision-making, large and small. Commit to working to achieve community well-being and resilience, equity, reconciliation, leaving no one behind. Require all future reports to council to include a section titled Climate Change Implications that will identify recommendations that will contribute to meeting the objectives of the CAP. Work with other community stakeholders to educate the public at large about steps that should be taken by individuals and businesses to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Urge both provincial and federal government and opposition parties to work rapidly to deliver the greenhouse gas emission reductions needed to keep global heating to the 1.5 degree goal, to minimize the life-threatening impacts of climate change. And lastly, forward the resolution to the Premier of Ontario, other Ontario ministers, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Parry Sound Representative Norm Miller, and MPP Scott Aitchison, and the leaders of the other opposition political parties. I just wanted to finally add that we would urge you as councillors and as community leaders to also take part in the Community Carbon Challenge, which is here on the screen in front of you. Very simple, just go to our website, climateactionmuskoka.org, and take the pledge to commit to cutting your own household greenhouse gas emissions. In conclusion, passing this resolution today will recognize we are rapidly exhausting a limited and non-renewable carbon budget at direct expense of future generations. Some of us are driven by the words of Ontario's former Commissioner for the Environment, Diane Sachs. If we do everything in our power to keep the global rise in temperatures below the critical 1.5 Celsius warming, our grandchildren will still see untold human suffering and environmental degradation in their lifetime. If we do nothing, they will be face to face with the end of our own human civilization as we know it. You are in the position to recognize the enormity of this problem and then develop the plan to address it. That is what we are asking you to do today. So please, ensure this resolution gets passed and ratified at Council without delay. Thank you for allowing us to present today. We're available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. I'll get you to stop. There you go. Okay, I am going to open it up to council. We will deal with this towards the end of our meeting, but we will go to questions now. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just really want to say thank you to Leslie for the presentation today. And as she well knows, I've been a huge supporter of this resolution. Was at the district. I seconded the motion at the district, and it's already exciting to see some of the actions starting to happen. As chair of the Community and Planning Services down at the district, I know that staff are already including the climate action analysis section in our reports at committee. So some things are, and of course, as you know, Kevin Boyle's already started the working group, at which all municipalities are taking part. So I just want to say I'm very supportive of the town of Huntsville passing a similar resolution. I do believe you're right. It's urgent, and we have to be part of it. The one thing that I have said on numerous conversations with members of the Climate Action Group is I think it's critically important that the town of Huntsville, when it comes back to our June council meeting, that we have in it our own paragraphs that suggest how it is we will be able to implement it, just as the town of Gravenhurst did. I think it's critically important. It's great for us to declare the emergency, but if we don't have a path as to how we are going to implement it, it's not worth a whole lot. So I think that it's critically important. Our staff have the opportunity to bring back the resolution with adapted for how the town of Huntsville will implement it. And so I'm really looking forward, and I hope that that's our direction today. That we will be looking at it at the June council meeting. So thank you again for your presentation. And last point is, I signed up for the Climate Change Challenge many months ago. So very excited about that too. Thanks again.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, ladies, we do have a resolution at the end of our meeting prepared, and as Deputy Mayor Alcock already outlined, we are part of the District of Muskoka. There's 4 of us from this council that sit at the district who all voted in favor of the climate change emergency at district. And what we want is our staff to bring back part of your resolution, part of our resolution, something that has achievable goals for us, so that it's not just a resolution to sit on the shelf, but something that we can actually make happen as a municipality. So again, we thank you for that presentation. We thank you for all the work that you are doing. And we will have a resolution that suggests we come back with a resolution at the June council meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
Okay, thanks again. Have a good day. Our third deputation, Kaylee Richter and Joanne McCarthy, life-saving buoy at Port Sydney Dock.
Your Worship, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Last summer, Kevin Schell had a tragic death by drowning at Kelvin Grove and Bracebridge. And when I heard about this story and supported my friend who was at the scene of the accident, I realized that locally in our village of Port Sydney, we don't have a buoyant throwing assist at the dock. So I come to you today as a mother of 3 children in this community, but also as a teacher at VK Greer, our local school. I care very deeply about all children and families in our community, and that's why I'm volunteering to speak with you today. What I'm asking for is a buoyant life-saving assist at the Port Sydney dock. I will quote from the Life Saving Society Waterfront Safety Standards. Every unsupervised waterfront shall have at least 1 buoyant throwing assist with a 15-meter rope and at least 1 reaching pole at least 3 meters in length. When I spoke with Ms. McDonald about my request and was denied, Ms. McDonald shared 2 barriers. She was concerned about the vandalism, potential vandalism. But I challenge you that we have in our beautiful parks here, we have benches, we have picnic tables, we have gorgeous planters, all of these things that may potentially be vandalized that are for our beauty and enjoyment. I'm asking you to install something that will save a life. And yes, there is a risk to vandalism. I don't disagree with that, but I feel we have a responsibility if we can potentially save a life. Ms. McDonald also shared that if we install one at the Port Sydney dock, then as council, you'll have a responsibility to put one at all public swimming areas within the town of Huntsville. Please do. So you've shared some of the barriers to installing this life-saving device, but the benefits are saving someone's life. I'd like to turn the mic over now to my friend Joanne McCarthy to share a short story with you, please.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here today, as Kaylee mentioned, because I had the unfortunate experience of being present during a drowning and a death. I do apologize. I haven't actually talked about this for a long time. I didn't expect to become so emotional, but I was present during that incident. And as I realize now, I was very fortunate to have the support of victim services at the time, which was immensely helpful. But the way the event happened was that a group of children were the first ones on the scene. And that was a group of 12-year-old boys from my neighborhood that I knew. And those children, because they learned it in life-saving swimming lessons, those children actually knew enough to run for the device. So they called for and yelled to people to grab the device, and one of the kids ran for it. Sadly, this was a situation where vandalism did occur, and the device was not there. So I realized, and I know firsthand, the risk of vandalism. And I strongly believe that regardless of vandalism or just not ever having one there, no one would have had to enter that water that day. And yet 6 people at different times entered that water. And 2 of them were 12-year-old children. The others were adults. And as we know, Kevin Shell was one of them. And I feel really strongly that if we don't have something there, we're never gonna save a life. And we're gonna risk the lives of so many others. And with Kaylee, I feel really strongly that it is important to provide these life-saving devices. I know the town of Bracebridge. I chatted with them immediately after the incident, and they have since added yet another device and pole right on the dock where it happened. So there's now 2 at that park. And I know they raised the same concerns about vandalism, and they've experienced it, and we did on that day. I know they're doing research into systems that will prevent vandalism. And I just ask that council will consider looking at creative ways to prevent the vandalism if we can, and just ensure that those devices are there so that nobody has to experience that again. And as you can see from how affected I was, there was a lot of people at that park that day, and a lot of them were children. So it has a big effect. And as I say, I'm grateful for victim services being there and helping people through it. I love that park, and I go to it very, very regularly, and I'm able to go there for 9 months now. I've been able to go there and be okay. I think of Kevin every time I go, but I'm okay. But it's interesting to me today that when I have to recount it fully, as you can see, I'm surprised myself at how overwhelming it is. But I really believe strongly that we need these devices. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing that story, and I'm so sorry that you had to share it with us. And I'm not sure there's any reason why we shouldn't put a device that could hopefully prevent something like that happen on our docks in our parks. So, Kaylee, I noticed you took your mic off and wanted to say something else.
I'm wondering if I could just close, Mayor Terziano.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing your story, Joanne. Thank you everyone for listening. I implore you to speak with your counterparts at the town of Bracebridge. As Joanne shared, that we are teaching our children to run to a life-saving device at the swimming lessons that our town offers. And so it's our responsibility to have something there. A buoyant throwing assist offers the potential to save a life, and having nothing risks death. Thank you.
Thank you both. we do have that on our agenda under new business later on, and we will get to it. But in case there's any comments or questions from council, I will open it up now. Okay, Councilor Schumacher.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. And again, it's not lost. We did lose a life of a 13-year-old boy at Longs Lake in Utterson in 2003. He went to VK Greer School.
Okay. Again, thank you both. We will be dealing with this later on, and we will make sure that you're notified of the decision. All right. Our last deputation council is Garth Bigelow and John Gallagher, short-term rental accommodation bylaw, second rental. John?
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. John Gallagher, John P. Gallagher and Associates, and I'm here today with Garth Bigelow, who's the owner of a property at the end of Markles Road. Garth has been operating a short-term rental in two of his buildings on his property. The first, he has his cottage down at the waterfront, and then he obtained a building permit for a secondary structure about 500 feet back from the water in a wooded area, and had been renting that until he was advised that he was in non-compliance with the short-term bylaw rental. As part of that, he contacted me and I contacted the town, Ingrid, and through Ingrid, Richard and Chris Nagy, I believe, were also involved. As part of that, we were asked to apply for a zoning amendment, and the zoning amendment was held at the last meeting, and I understand it was approved last night. The cabin itself is very small. It's only 200 square feet, which also includes a covered deck on it. Property is quite large at 1.27 hectares, has about 200 feet on the river. And as I stated earlier, the location is set well back from the waterfront. As part of that process, everyone within 400 feet was notified, and there was only one letter of objection. My clients have not had any complaints over the years, and they have a high rating through Airbnb as a super host. And the size of the structure limits its use to one or two persons. It's very small, and it's not conducive to large gatherings. Part of the purpose of coming here is my client also has other investments in Huntsville, and one of them is a fourplex that he's actually trying to use the money from this venture to fund. And that fourplex will be for month-to-month rentals, not for short-term rental, and that's located up on the town line. Council had approved a severance, and the lands had been zoned for the use. The application was heard by the planning committee, and it was successfully approved. One of the items that there seemed to be some confusion around was the short-term rental bylaw, in that you're only allowed one structure per lot to be rented out. And in this situation, we're asking for a site-specific approval. We're not asking it to be open wide, because in every instance it will be different. He did have the support of the majority of his neighbors. They're basically saying that there hasn't been any issues around that type of use being used. And when it's not being used, his kids hang out in the bunkie at the back there, and they also use that as well. The application was in an SR, or is in an SR zone. The cabin itself is well hidden from view, sitting at the back of the lot. It meets all the setbacks as far as side yard and rear yard. It's a low profile, it's a small structure, and as such, very minimal impact on the site. We would understand there were some issues on the structure of how the committee would be, so we came to the general committee as we were advised. And again, we're hoping that committee will support his request to have the short-term rental in the private cabin at the back, site specific. And we understand that staff would want the site plan agreement that's already on title to the lands to be updated to include that as part of that. And I think Garth wants to say a few words, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. And Garth is also here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Garth, are you on screen? There you are.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors. Last time I was on here, I had Becca with me to do the talking. I get really nervous with these. Unfortunately, she works at the hospital, and it's a bit crazy there right now. So she got called in. So anyways, so yeah, I think I just wanted to touch base a little bit more on this property and what it means to us. It's when Becca's working and I take the kids up north, we have an opportunity to stay at the cottage or the bunkie. Well, the kids are always, it's the bunkie is the spot they want to go to. So it's pretty important, for our family and so on. As John was saying, that, we basically, when we got this up and rolling, we took the funds from that and we were able to purchase a piece of property on Town Line. Our goal is to someday hopefully move to Huntsville, and it's part of a bigger plan for us. Anyways, yeah, we've had over 170 stays at this little bunkie, and it's we've had zero complaints. We've had amazing guests. It's not just it's a pretty special little place there. We do charge a fair bit for people to stay there, so we do attract amazing guests. We also make a phone call to every single one as well to make sure that we're happy with who's going to stay there. I think it's extremely important to us that whoever stays at the cottage or the bunkie, that they're top-notch guests, because we use basically we use both of these these buildings on a regular basis ourselves, and we're very particular about who stays there. Anyways, we've also had extreme support, tremendous support from our neighbors. The closest ones that are in to the bunkie as well. I think we've had 6 letters of support. Yeah, so we just hope that we can keep this going.
Okay, thank you. Again, this will be dealt with towards the end of the meeting under new business, but I will open it up to council for questions of yourself or John at this time. I don't see any questions. I guess I would ask one question while you're here though, John. Have the outstanding issues been resolved, such as the conversion of a building permit from it being for a shed to now a habitable space?
I think that was one of the conditions of approval, was the site plan amendment and the building permit. I know that Garth has had discussions with Chris Nagy, and maybe Garth can just expand upon that.
Yeah. Yeah, when I talked to Chris, now this is a bit ago, so I think that I think we would, John, you probably know more about this process than I do, but my understanding is we would apply, or we get another permit for the different use, I guess.
For a conversion. So when he took out the original permit, because of the size of the structure, he just called it a man cave and or a shed. And so as part of that approval, there will be a conversion to actually call it a private cabin. And through the zoning, a private cabin is permitted as a right on any SR property, but it was the use of the short-term rental that we had to get the zoning for to allow it to be used for that. And that's what was achieved last night, I believe.
Right. And when I talked to Chris, he mentioned a couple things that we might need to tweak to get to that point. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, as I say, it'll come up under new business, and if you don't want to hang around for a few hours, we will notify you. Hang on, I see Councillor Leap has his hand up for a question, though.
Thank you, Your Worship. Really quick, the little cabin, was it purchased as a prefab or was it built on site?
Yeah, we built it on site right from scratch. We get a lot of people think it's a sea container, but it's not. It's a stick frame little thing.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Garth. John?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Council. I think we kept all those deputations under 10 minutes. That was great. So we're into our regular business, and the first report is Corp 2021-46 Reserve Policy Update. And I have a resolution moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that committee rescinds the following resolutions. Corp 13611 Reserves and Reserve Fund Policy, Corp 13, and GC 15815 Reserve Level Policy, Budget and Financial 09. And further, that committee approve the corporate policy financial reserves attached to Report Corp 2021-46. And further, that committee approve the name change of the Working Capital Reserve to Working Fund Reserve. And further, that committee approve the name change of the Salary, Wages and Benefit Reserve to Human Capital Reserve. Julia.
Thank you, Your Worship. So before you, I actually have two policies that we had in existence. There was the reserve fund policy, and before that there was the reserve and reserve fund policy, or sorry, reserve level policy. So what I've done is I've just taken these two policies and combined them just to make it a little more clear, so we didn't have two policies kind of on the same subject. So that's the main thing that we've done here. It's more administrative in nature, just to combine the two and make them a little bit easier to read. The next thing I wanted to highlight was just the name changes. So I know throughout the years we get it gets a bit confusing with the working capital reserve. This reserve is actually just our general reserve fund that we use that hasn't been designated for anything yet, but we do have a policy in place that says that it has to get a certain level for in case there's ever an emergency that we need to access these funds. But I think the word capital has always thrown it off a little bit, and the public seems to think it might be for capital, like capital dollars. So we're just recommending just to clean it up, to change it to the working funds reserve, and that's also consistent with the FIR wording that's in place. The salaries, wages and benefits reserve, this reserve is generally used for things like employee costs, benefit floats. If we have any stop loss insurance, it gets put into that, any proceeds from that. If we have any costs related to unbudgeted severance and termination costs, it can get pulled from that. And also the WSIB surcharges. We have a motion that says that any kind of ups and downs of that get pulled from this reserve. So we were just looking at just cleaning this up and just calling it the Human Capital Reserve, just so it's a little more descriptive. The third thing I just wanted to highlight too was the authority to transfer funds. So currently right now in the policy we have in the reserve level policy, it states that any reserve transfers must be approved by council. So what we're recommending here is that in order to make decisions quickly and confidentially regarding any staff severances or terminations, that the CAO be authorized to use funds out of this capital reserve account so that we can make decisions quickly and hopefully less costly. And also in a confidential manner. So part of the safeguard of this is the fact that we do have the budget and financial reporting policy in place. So if there were any funds that were taken out of this reserve, the CAO through the treasurer and our reporting would have to report back to committee on how the funds were used, so that it was documented and that council was aware of any movement coming in and out of that reserve. The other thing that was in there with that authority was also to use up to $20,000 a year for unbudgeted training. So this would be probably corporate training. So we have stuff that comes up throughout the year where we don't know that there's training available or there's a need for some training to be done. And we have a fairly minimal balances in our training budgets in each of our departments to be able to fund these types of things. A lot of the training and memberships, that sort of thing, that are in the budgets are more for professional designations and tickets, that sort of thing. So it is fairly limited, the funds that are available for training that comes up unexpectedly. And that's pretty much it for the changes.
Okay, thanks, Julia. Questions from council. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Julia, for the presentation. I think it makes lots of sense. I do have a question though, and that is with respect to the authority to transfer funds, for the CAO to transfer funds, are there any parameters around that? Or is it just carte blanche, whatever the CAO, and that's just I'd be curious about parameters.
So I may have to get our CAO or our HR manager to address that, but because I believe that if there were any terminations, that sort of thing, most of that would be determined by the lawyers. And I don't know if Lisa's on there, if she can. I'm not sure if she's there or not. So it wouldn't be, it would be through consultation with the legal department and through HR, what those would be. It certainly wouldn't be, it wouldn't be just up to the CAO. That's never how it usually occurs. So there was no cap on that. We didn't set a cap, and I mean that's certainly something that committee can recommend putting a cap on there. Right now, there's about $350,000 in that reserve account, so it certainly couldn't be above that. And I also think it's important to note that when there are terminations or any severances, that sort of thing, we do try to look internally with our existing budgets to see if we can fund it first through existing budgets. So that would kind of be our first way that we would look at it. But this would be if a decision does need to be made quickly, that the CAO is able to react to that and then report back to committee on that.
Thank you for that. May I have a follow-up? Sorry.
Certainly. Go ahead.
Thank you for that response, Julia. So if it's for efficiency and speed, I understand that makes sense. Have we had a lot of situations where it has been bogged down by council, having to come to council? I'm assuming maybe we have, if that's an issue.
I think it's just, and I can't speak to the specifics if there has been, but if there is an issue that comes up, this would just allow us the ability to act swiftly. Because, like just to give an example, if we did need to come back and have a council decision on a reserve, it would actually take 2 months unless we had a special meeting. So in that time, if you can't act quickly, then you're actually into another 2 months of pay. You could be into another 2 months of pay that you would have to add on to the severance. So we're just looking at ways to make it more cost efficient as well.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Worship. Respectfully, I can't support this. I don't understand, I guess, why we need to make name changes and what's perceived by the public. Certainly, we're taking capital out of one name and putting it into another. So I don't know how that is not confusing in its own. And basically, I'm against the authority to transfer funds. I think that we as councillors have a role to play, and the reason these things come to us is for that important oversight. I would add that if something is an emergency, generally, I don't understand why these things need to be rushed, because if it's an emergency, there's an opportunity to make an error in doing something quickly. And as the treasurer pointed out, if there's an issue, we can always call a special meeting of council. I just don't believe that we should be, as council, we should be abdicating our duties to the taxpayer by just handing off carte blanche authority where we've consistently in the past had these approved by council. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate that. Thanks for the report. I personally don't see an issue with changing the names of them and join them as one. That's not really changing the policy itself. But can you give me an example of when you'd have to use money quickly? Because you did state the fact that most times it's completed by a lawyer. You know, the employee's lawyer, our lawyer get together, they discuss a severance package, et cetera, like that, and then it would come to council. So I just need to know what he would consider it being quickly, or an example of that.
Julia, or?
So I wasn't sure if our CEO was going to answer, or.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, through you, Madam Chair. So I think the issue is, and I do apologize, my power flickered, so I was out of the meeting for a bit, so I wasn't quite sure what Director Mackenzie had mentioned, but it's not so much, the urgency is certainly a piece of it, depending on when terminations do occur. The issue is the privacy and the involvement of council with respect to those decisions. So as you know, that council would not get involved in any decisions with respect to staff departures unless it was my own, but they wouldn't get involved with any of the decisions. It would all be dealt with through a lawyer, and the lawyer would provide the best advice for the municipality with respect to any type of compensation that might be warranted. So I think not only by having this in the policy, it keeps council removed from that specific level of detail, which council should not get involved in. But through the reporting, as Julia mentioned earlier, the transparency is still there because all of the information is reported through our financial reporting. So it's certainly not that council wouldn't be aware of generally what decisions are being made. Council's just not informed of the specific detail about the staff departure, which is really something that should be segregated between council and staff. I have a feeling that I might be freezing because it looks like I'm slow at this end. So I hope I've answered your question, Councillor Armour.
I have a follow-up.
Sure.
Sarah, do you have an example of when an employee has been let go, terminated, et cetera, and you're paying the severance where you would have to bring it to council, or would that eliminate this whole process completely?
So through you, Madam Chair, typically what would happen is if we had a situation whereby a termination was taking place, we would have discussions with legal. Legal would advise us what our obligations are with respect to the termination. I would then work with the treasurer to determine if that was something that we could do within existing budget. If it's a termination or any labor costs associated with a departure that could be funded in existing SWB, council would actually never hear the specifics about that because it's funded within a council approved budget. However, if there is a situation where there was, and if there was a staff departure whereby we felt that the functions of that position could be bridged over the term that's required to pay for that termination or the severance, then we might just leave that position vacant. So say you have an employee that was entitled to 5 months severance based under case law, and we thought for 5 months we could struggle along without filling that position, then we would absolutely do that. However, if it was a severance or that required funds that we didn't have within an existing SWB budget, and we needed to replace that position as soon as possible, that is when I potentially might not have enough resources to actually move forward with the severance. So again, I hope that answers your question, Councillor Armour.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think this is a matter of confidentiality and efficiency, and it's as simple as that. And I'm totally in support of this resolution. I think it covers all the bases. And as I said, if it's a matter of confidentiality and efficiency, and our CAO is absolutely correct. There are certain areas when it comes to staffing that council has no business being involved in. So I'm going to support this. I think this is a good resolution.
Okay, I would have to say that I don't support it for a number of reasons, and I do appreciate the council is not involved in staffing decisions, nor should they be. But I also believe that the CAO bylaw states that they are the person in charge of staffing decisions as long as they're working within budget. And I think the use of reserves is a council authority, and you're asking us to give up that authority, and we're not challenging your right to manage staff the way you see fit, as long as you're following your CAO bylaw, which says you must do it within budget. And confidentiality is not an issue because anything that comes to council with regard to staff comes in closed session. So for those reasons, I would support the resolution for the name changes, but I will not support the section 4.2 for the transfer of funds. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Withey?
Thank you. I would just request a recorded vote on this, please.
Okay, all right. Tanya, we need you, I think, for this, right? And just before you start, Councillor Weave has a question, I think.
Thank you, Worship. So is there a proposal to break this up into two motions, or I'm sort of hearing two things?
We have, although, just a second, the way this is written, we just have approving the corporate policy and then approving the two name changes. So the one section we've been talking about is within the policy. Yeah, I'm not sure how to break up this resolution if somebody wanted to. Madam Clerk, can you help us?
Certainly, Mayor Terziano. If Mayor Terziano would like to pass the chair over to the deputy mayor for a moment, the mayor could put a motion of amendment on the floor to remove section 4.2. I believe that's what you were specifically concerned about. And Councillor Withey, I think, was also concerned about. Totally your call. I leave that up to your discretion.
Okay, so I think the suggestion is the first bullet that committee approved the corporate policy financial reserves attached to Corp 2021-46. The amendment would be with the removal of section 4.2. Would that be correct? Madam Clerk?
Yes, we can do an amendment to remove section 4.2 if you wanted to pass the chair, or if some other person wanted to make that amendment. I'm Julia, if I have that right.
Okay. Just before that, I'm going to go to Julia. She had her hand up first.
Sorry, I just want to just to break it up. There's 4.2.1, which I believe is what the specific one you're speaking about. So that one has the corporate training and the unbudgeted termination benefit. So that's 4.2.1. 4.2.2 actually just outlines the CAO's responsibilities, just to recognize what is already in our budget and financial controls policy. So if we do have any overages with capital, there's a certain dollar amount that that we can go over. So this is just to clean that part up, so it's clear that we do have the authority to take money out of the reserves for those capital projects where they may be over or under budget. So that's just to clean that up. So I believe it would just be the 4.2.1 that you would want to remove.
So 4.2.1.1 and 0.2, correct? Okay. Councillor Withy, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I'd be willing to move that amendment so you don't have to advocate, you leave the chair.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Deputy Mayor Alcock. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I'm not sure who can answer this, but other municipalities must have the same type of policies in place to deal with. What's the CEO's responsibility in those areas? I'm going to answer that one.
Julia?
I did check with, I don't know if there's any specific policies, but I did check with the district of Muskoka and ask them how they handle these types of things. And they never bring any of these matters to council's attention. It's all done internally by the CIO.
Tanya, have you got that amendment done?
Yes, I do, Mayor Terziano. Would you like me to put that up on the screen?
I would, thank you.
Okay, sure. Can you see that?
Yeah. So moved by Councillor Withy, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock. It is recommended that the following be added to paragraph 2 with the deletion of 4.2, Chief Administrative Officer 4.2.1, the authority to transfer funds from the Human Capital Reserve for the following purposes: unbudgeted corporate training to a maximum of 20,000, or administration of unbudgeted termination benefits. All in favor of the amendment, or sorry, questions? Councillor Schumacher.
Yeah, just for my own clarity, if the CAO is able to do it within budget, she doesn't have to bring anything forward. It's all a staffing issue. We're really pulling this because it's an over and above ask, correct?
That's correct.
Layman's terms, thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
You're muted, Jay.
You have to hold down the space bar, Jason.
You're still muted, Jason.
Yeah, spacebar doesn't work today, apparently. So that removes the ability to support the whole motion, correct?
Sorry, you broke.
So how do we vote?
Sorry, you broke.
How do we vote now?
On the amendment?
How do we vote? Yeah. How do we vote?
On the amendment?
Because, yeah, that's been removed. So
the amendment would remove that section, and then we would go back to the main motion.
we're going to vote on the amendment first and then go back to the main motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify though with the $20,000 for unexpected training. So now if they can't find it within their budget, then they're going to have to come back to council and ask approval to send staff members if it's outside. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah. Okay. No further questions? Councillor Wheat, no? Councillor Wheat?
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. I'm having a second thoughts as I'm thinking through it, but I kind of feel a little bit like we're slowing we're kind of slowing down the operation, I think, overall. So I'm actually not going to support this. I would support the motion as presented in the at the top of the discussion, but I won't support the changes. I think we're clogging things up, and I think that's what makes towns run inefficiently. Support it.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would, couple quick things. I don't agree with Councillor Weeb in that this authority is already in place. It hasn't slowed us down yet, and there is always the opportunity for special meetings and special circumstances. And the other thing I would ask, or I don't know how this works, but if this amendment passes, I don't feel that there's a need for a recorded vote on the main motion with the amendment, if that works. Not sure of the rules. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to call a question on the amendment. All in favor? I'm in favor, 6. That carries. I guess I should have said opposed for the record, but. Okay, we're back to the main motion. So the main motion as amended. Does council need to see that on the screen? No, I guess not. All in favor? Sorry, Councillor Armour?
I'm just voting, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm just not happy with that vote on the amendment. I didn't see hands or any indication in favor of this. I think I saw 3 or 4 hands go up in favor of the amendment, but that was it. So could we somehow have clarification on exactly how that vote went? Because it certainly wasn't clear from my end here that it passed.
Okay, Councillor, I clearly counted 6 in favor of the amendment, but I'm happy to ask those in favor to raise their hands again. Those that were in favor of the amendment, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you see that, Councillor? 6?
I saw it this time, Your Worship, but I certainly didn't see it the first time around.
Okay. All right, the main motion is amended. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay. Report Court 2021-39, amendment to the council expense policy. Reba, welcome. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that committee approve the amendments to the council expense policy, budget financial 04 as attached in Schedule A to Report Corp 2021-39, and further that motion Court 4619 ratified by council on August 26, 2019 be rescinded. Reba.
Thank you, Chair Terziano. So I just wanted to run through quickly some of the amendments to this policy. First and foremost, we did a reformatting of the policy. So that's just to make it more consistent with the newer financial policies that we've brought forward. We've also added some definitions into the policy just for clarity purposes to explain, what an eligible expense is, what an ineligible expense is. The main change, though, was in the change in the reporting timeline. So in the previous policy or the existing policy, the reporting is done monthly. So that means that the council expenses will be uploaded to the website on a monthly basis. So the finance team and the corporate information team did work together to create a new dashboard in the open government section of the town's website. So this dashboard shows the data in a much different, in different ways. So you can search by counselor, you can search by year, you can search by month, by type of expense. All of that information is now on the website. So, you know, that reporting process monthly does take a lot of staff time to do, and it's a fairly inefficient process. So now with this new dashboard, it's much more efficient, but it still takes staff time. So sort of consistent with our budget and financial controls policy, we were, you know, requesting to change that reporting to quarterly rather than monthly. All of the information is still the same. It's just put up every 3 months instead of every month.
Okay, questions? I went to the dashboard last night and had a look at it. It's very, very clear. If it proves to be still very time consuming, I don't see why we can't really post it once a year either. So we're still being very transparent. All in favor of the resolution? And that carries. Okay, back to Julia. Development charge interest. A resolution moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock. It is recommended that the development charges interest rate on freezes and deferrals be calculated using the average annual Statistics Canada non-residential building construction price index at September 30th of each year plus 1% be approved. And further, that non-profit housing development whose prime objective is to provide affordable housing as defined in section 11.1 of the Development Charges Act be exempt from paying interest. And further, that the treasurer be authorized to execute any agreements related to development charge payment agreements in section 27 agreements for payment of development charges at a time other than when payments would otherwise be made, using the approved interest rate and being to the satisfaction of the town solicitor. And further, that budget and financial 12 deferral of development charges policy be amended as attached to Report Corp 2021-38. Julia?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm sure as committee is aware, there were some significant changes to the Development Charges Act about 2 years ago, which allowed for freezes and deferrals of development charges for certain types of properties. So we at the area municipality treasurers were tasked as a group by the district to go back and come up with a consistent approach for an interest rate on charging of those. So the group went back and what was recommended was that, as outlined in the recommendation, that be calculated using the average annual Statistics Canada non-residential building construction price index at September each year plus 1%. And that was what has been approved at the district level. So we're asking that committee would keep this the same so that we can have a consistent approach for developers across Muskoka. The other thing that we've added in here is that nonprofit developments be for affordable housing be exempt from paying interest. So this is just another way that we can promote affordable housing in our community. The other is just we have an existing, and I think we are one of the few municipalities that have this in Muskoka, I believe, and that's a deferral of development charges. We had this before the Development Charge Act changed. So we do allow for deferrals on residential properties and on commercial properties, but currently there is no interest rate on those. So what I'm proposing is that we are recommending is that we keep a consistent approach so that if we do have applications for those types where it's a different time period and for different types of development, that we are charging interest on those as well. So that's why there's an amendment to the deferral of development charges policy. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Council questions? Seeing none. We had a good discussion about it at district, and I'm happy to see that we're staying consistent throughout Muskoka because I think it's important for the developers to see that consistency as well. All in favor? That carries. Back to Riva, tangible capital asset policy. Resolution moved by Councillor Weep, seconded by Councillor Thompson. It is recommended that committee approve the tangible capital asset policy attached to Schedule A to Report Corp 2021-40, and further that bylaw 2008-133 tangible capital asset policy be repealed. Reba.
Thank you, Chair Terziano. So essentially, the tangible capital asset policy basically talks about the accounting treatment for tangible capital assets that are owned by the town. So the existing policy was put forward in 2008 in response to a new public sector accounting standard that came into place. Since then, the policy has only been amended once in 2016. So after that, that last amendment in December of 2017, the province of Ontario brought forward the asset management regulation. So in response to that regulation, we've now, the town has an asset management, strategic asset management policy, as well as an asset management plan. So in response to those two newer documents, we undertook kind of a review of the existing tangible capital asset policy. So the main changes, so what we're proposing is to repeal the previous bylaw and put forward a new policy. And that's mainly just because there are so many changes in that there was a lot of examples and a lot of information in our existing policy that is kind of redundant. It doesn't add any further clarity. It doesn't provide any additional information. So this new policy provides clear definitions and outlines the accounting treatment for additions and disposals of tangible capital assets. It also provides capitalization thresholds and updated estimated useful lives for each of the categories of tangible capital assets. We've also tried to make it consistent with our current strategic asset management policy and our asset management plan. So the groupings of tangible capital assets are consistent with our asset management plan. And that's essentially it.
Okay. Questions, Council? Good report. We know that capital asset planning and everything else changes continually, so not surprised that our policy is changing too. I hope we're running out of policies to update though. All in favor? That carries. I think we've updated about 20 policies in the last couple meetings. Review of the CPI measures. Julia. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Schumacher. It is recommended that CPI trim be the preferred inflationary measure for the town of Huntsville, and further that CPI trim be used in determining inflationary annual increases in existing and future policies unless otherwise noted. And further that CPI trim be used in determining inflationary annual increases in existing and future agreements. Julia?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this isn't a policy, but it is just a motion just to clarify and just to provide some guidance for staff when we are looking at different policies and agreements, that sort of thing. In the past, we've used different measures and we just want to have a consistent approach and a transparent approach going forward. And when we just looked at it in the past, we've looked to CPIX, which was recommended at one point by the Bank of Canada, but I think since 2016, they've moved away from that. So we're looking at using the CPI trim, and it takes away each month, it takes away the bottom 20% of volatile items and the top 20% of volatile items. And those items will change based on their volatility. So it just creates a more stable measure month to month so that we don't have large swings each month when we're looking at applying inflation.
Questions? Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Your Worship. I found this one really interesting, actually. I watched these types of, I'm really interested in the economics of the macroeconomic question. So I found this report actually quite interesting. And I think that looking at it really from an unbiased perspective, I think you've chosen the right route, given how imperfect the whole CPI debate really is. So I'm going to support this. And I wonder if you had any I just wonder what the discussion was like when you were first looking at it. If it was a contentious discussion, or if it kind of was a natural.
Julia?
So it wasn't too contentious. I think when we looked at what the kind of the three recommended by the Bank of Canada, they were fairly similar. So I think we were just, I think we looked at, it wasn't too contentious, because when you look at the three, they are very, they seem to be stable, but when you look at the CPI trim, it does seem to be the most stable. The one thing I found really interesting is when you look over the last 26 years, you'll see that overall they've pretty much all stayed, they've all netted to be the same overall average increase, which I think is very interesting. So it's not that one's going to have a higher over time. They all seem to be pretty much right on par. But what we're looking at was the fluctuations month to month, so that if we're taking, you know, like for example, so CPI or CPI this month that just passed, so for April was 3.4, whereas CPI trim was 2.3. So if we had picked April as our month, there would have been a significant if we were using CPI rather than CPI trim. So it's just, we really wanted to get rid of that month to month large swings.
Just follow up real quick. So I mean, I guess the question I was really driving at was there any, or do any municipalities don't go with the CPI index, but with some other form of trying to measure, you know, the increase?
I did talk to some of my cohorts and throughout Muskoka, the other area treasurers, and I don't think there's a consistent approach that's been going across, but they were interested to see what we did. To see if maybe they were going to maybe kind of adopt the same thing, but I don't think any had gone to the extent of formally adopting a one measure over the other.
Julia, the only question I have is when we do our budget guidelines, which gives us the CPI times 2.5, or I forget exactly what it is. So the CPIX, which we've been using, would have been set in March of this year at 1.4, and the CPI trim is 2.2, which is going to give us a fairly significant increase in our budgeting costs. I mean, that's almost a full % higher times 2.5. Should we have any concerns about that, or should we be re-looking at what our guidelines would be if we adopt this?
So that's a great question, and I'm sorry, but we do have one more policy coming next month, and it is our budget and financial reporting policy. So we are bringing that forward, and in that policy, because we have some other revisions to that, we would be adopting the CPI trim for that. So what that, if we were using that policy and we just had CPI, exactly April would have been 3.4, and if we'd been using trim, it would have been 2.3. So you're right, if we do stick with the CPI trim, it's a much more stable, and you won't see that large fluctuation month to month.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, no other questions? All in favor? That carries. Council, it's almost 10:30. Does that anybody want to have a quick break? Yeah, let's take 7 minutes and come back at 10:30.
My power's out here, so if my battery dies, I'll be gone for good.
Uh-oh. Is it storming or is it just power out?
The power's out. It was raining earlier, but that's it.
Okay, just about all back. Just waiting for Councillor Fitzgerald. And our next report is on a Goldie Street easement exchange. Jessica's up, and Jessica, I'll just read the resolution before we start. Moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Withey. It's recommended that staff be authorized to exchange the easement registered as instrument DM 317730 and described as part of Block A, Plan 9, Geographic Township of Chaffey, now in the town of Huntsville and the district municipality of Muskoka, designated as Part 1 on 35R 17958 for an easement over part of Lot 4, Plan 2, or Plan 9, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Chaffey, now in the town of Huntsville, designated as Part 1 on Plan 35R 11533, and further that the easement in favor of the town of Huntsville being released shall be and is hereby declared surplus to the town of Huntsville's requirements and may be released to the owners of the servient tenement for the sum of $1 plus all associated legal and administrative expenses. Jessica.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. So this report is for approval to complete an easement exchange. As described, Part 1 shown in yellow on the Appendix 1 for the Part 1 shown in green. The owners at 52 Goldie Street approached the town about moving an existing stormwater management easement. Staff reviewed the location and felt that the area in green made more sense and would be an appropriate location. The terms and conditions will remain. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that. Questions, council? Seeing none, all in favor of the resolution? And that carries. Thanks, Jessica. And I guess you're still up for Falls View license of occupation. Oh, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Weeb. It is recommended that committee deny the license of occupation application LOO 2020-06 for 40 Falls View Road to recognize the existing location of a 256 square foot dock located on town land adjacent to the property due to potential future public use and the need for greater municipal waterfront access. And further, the Public Works and Sanitation Committee recommendation number 36/82 be rescinded. Jessica, are you doing this one? Is Steve here as well to help?
Yes, Steve's going to join me.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so this application was made last year and council placed it on hold pending a full review of the license of occupation policy. As you're aware, that policy was passed last evening. The property address is 40 Fallsview and the dock is located on Ontario Street. When the application was received, a historical search was done regarding the property and a resolution was found from 1982. Subsequently, a building permit for a dock for 4 feet by 25 feet. No subsequent signed license of occupation was found. Staff visited the site and it's near the Port Sydney Dam and in close proximity to the parking lot. The town's strategic plan calls for access to water amenities, and staff identified that this particular area as an opportune location to use for additional parking, swimming, launching of canoes. It's a safe area away from the dock. During the staff visit, they also observed that the dock was missing lumber and it was deteriorating. And as such, staff is recommending denial of this application. If you have any questions, Steve and I can answer.
Okay. And this was the one that Lanny delegated on earlier. So questions, Council. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Director Hernan and myself have revisited it a few times and come to the conclusion that maybe it isn't the best location for public access. There's a lot of public access available nearby there, and that I kind of tend to agree with Lanny's deputation that if someone's had that in existence for 40 years, that it seems that an exclusive use is the best use for that particular location. I'm down there at least 3 times a week. I've never seen anyone enter or exit the water at that particular location. And I think if we spoke with the applicant and had him replace the dock ASAP and enter into a license of occupation, that would be the best thing to do. And I don't know if you have any comments on that, Director Hernan.
Steve, you have any comments right now? Because I got a lot of hands up on the screen.
Not at this time, Mayor Terziano.
All right, I wasn't watching, so I don't know whose hands went up first, so I'm just going in order of what I see. Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Your Worship. I somehow made it to the top of the pile as opposed to last night. You know, after hearing the deputation and giving it some more thought, I tend to agree that perhaps I wouldn't support denying it. I think maybe this would be the right use. And I also think that, you know, creating another revenue stream for something that's always been there or has been there for a long time, it's kind of a win-win, I think. So actually, I think I'm going to not support.
Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Yeah, I mean, at this time, I would agree. I guess my question to Jessica and to Steve is that, I mean, I agree with Councillor Fitzgerald. It's not really that utilized, that particular part, but at some point, if we do end up, you know, needing to use it, we can say no or rescind the application at that time. But for now, as Councillor Reed said, like, let's get the revenue stream.
Deputy Mayor Alpop.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize for the delay. It's good. I'm right after Councillor Schumacher. We sort of said what I was thinking. I normally would say absolutely support more public access, but I am hearing the comments about the use at this particular location and that it isn't. So I do have a question though, and that is, if we were to approve this submission, would we see that we would, you know, it sounds like there isn't a beach there, and so we'd have to do some work if we were going to turn it into a municipal swimming spot. And have we included that in our plans, our capital plans going forward, or this is sort of, if we got rid of the dock, this could be a public spot. And if we don't have any plans for it, then I think I'm probably like the others, think that I can't support this particular report.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, 2 questions. First question was, is this brought to light about this dock because they applied for a license of occupation? Is that why we are identifying it? And my second question is, if we were to deny this recommendation, we have to have something in there saying that that dock needs to be brought up to current standard, municipal standards. So,
Steve?
If council denied this report, my understanding, and that would certainly be one of the conditions we put on, is it would have to be brought up immediately to a standard, because right now it's in an unsafe condition. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the location. I do have the map up, Mayor Terziano, if you want to review that, if that would help the matters at all.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So just to give you an overview of the area, this is the dam in Port Sydney. Ontario Street comes in through here, as you know. The property in question is right here, 40 Fallsview. He's addressed off Fallsview Road right here. Keep in mind that these property lines are not accurate on our town mapping system. The actual corner peg of the lot is back over here. So the whole lot, if you would shift further down on the page and back in. Just zooming in a little closer. This is the dock in question. There is a wall here, a low overhead dam wall here. It's where the falls are. I've never seen it, but there is a beaten path in through here where you can see where people are using it to access the water with canoes and stuff. Certainly wouldn't recommend this area for a swim area with the dam here with the currents there, but there is indication the public do travel through here. Like I say, I've never seen anybody carrying a canoe. I'm not there on weekends. We certainly know that this is a busy area. We have lots of problems with parking along here and trying to create enough space for everybody. And keep in mind, in the license of occupation that we passed last night, it talks about the side yard lines protruding out, if you would, to sort of figure out who would be entitled to a dock or apply for a dock and what would be approved. And this whole area along here has these. So if you project the lines out, you'd see which ones would make sense and which we could arguably agree to. This one in the corner, it is an anomaly in the fact that the lines don't actually protrude out and would match up with the dock. Certainly recognize that it has been there for quite some time. So it's a tough decision for council to make. There is a clause in the policy that we can always cancel the license with notice if we needed it for future use, if we decided that was going to be an access point or something like that. And if council did decide to deny this and decide to move on, I would suggest maybe we put a clause in there that this is for the existing owner, so this doesn't become an ongoing problem down the road. We do have some anomalies like this which are going to be before council for consideration. So just as a description, there is your dock, there is the lot in question with his residence, and happy to answer any other questions for you.
Okay. Councillor Stone.
Thank you. So this property owner has been using this dock on public property for 40 years without paying a fee to the town. Is this correct?
That is my understanding, but did receive some form of permission by an older bylaw that Jessica found.
And a follow-up. So will this fit under our what we passed last night under the new bylaw? And this will be a private dock. It won't be for public use in any way?
That is correct. That is what he's applying for, and he would be paying a yearly fee, and he would have to have the proper insurance to protect the municipality.
Okay. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to I guess add a few more details. The dock is not easily accessible in its current location from the road. There's only about 3 feet between the roadway and the dock itself. So to me, it doesn't seem like a suitable area when there's so many other areas for access within 30 seconds. And, boat launch over it. There's no suitable place for a boat. Considerable works. And boats pull up and park at the falls. So I really don't think we're doing a disservice to the public here. I don't think it's an appropriate area for a public facility. Be in the midsummer and mucky. The only use would be for boats, and we don't allow our people to moor boats over on public facilities. So seems to be the best use to me.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yeah, I mean, as Director Hernan said, I would, if the consensus is to deny staff's report, but I would add the piece about, you know, the current owner and make sure that it's with, the agreement is with the current owner so that it doesn't, as I say, we may end up down the road, who knows what, you know, our master plan and whatever says, we may end up utilizing, but I would agree right now, nobody really uses that space other than if there's a few canoes, but having that dock there is not going to preclude the people who are still constantly coming in with their canoes off to the side.
Great. Tanya, you're on screen for a reason.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. Do I hear a motion from Councillor Fitzgerald that he would like to change it to approve?
I will.
Is there a seconder to?
I would.
Would you like it up on the screen, Mayor Terziano?
Sure.
So this is the first one. That's the amendment.
Moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Schumacher. Is recommended that word deny be changed to approve. All in favor? And that carries. And then the main motion as amended. All in favor? And that carries. And I assume then that it would be communicated that the old dock has to come out and a new dock put in under a license of occupation, with whatever parameters staff can impose on that, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Councillor Armour?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I was going to ask those questions of what the license of occupation was going to look like, but I guess we can add those restrictions in that when they sign off with new docs.
Okay. Thanks for that. Jessica, you're still up. We have a license of occupation, shore road allowance, and road allowance closure fees. Moved by Councillor Withey, seconded by Councillor Stone. Is recommended that the committee approve the following changes to the town's fee and charges bylaw. License of occupation, create a new fee of $100 for the provision of conditional approval letters. Amend the utility fee to $1,100 for the term of the license. Original road allowance increased to $7.50 per square meter, or appraisal at the sole expense of the applicant, conducted by an appraiser whose professional license is satisfactory to the director or designate, whichever is less. And further, that the following proceeds and annual fees be allocated as follows: shore road allowance closing annual fees to Parks Capital, license of occupation annual fees to Parks Capital, dock lease annual fees to Parks Capital, and sale of surplus land to Town Capital Replacement Reserve. And further, that staff prepare and present the amendment to the fees and charge bylaw for council's approval. Jessica.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. So this report was done, as Mayor Terziano mentioned earlier, we've been reviewing a lot of policies, and this prompted this review of fees and where the funds will be allocated. Staff reviewed other municipalities and looked at time spent for cost recovery purposes. The license of occupation fees, staff are recommending the application fee remain at $600, the annual rent remain at $1,100, and a new addition of a license of occupation utility fee of $1,100 for the 20-year term, so just a one-time fee. In addition, in the new policy that was passed last night, There was a pre-approval letter that was added for when an existing license of occupation changed ownership, and staff is recommending a fee of $100 for that letter. We also reviewed the original shore and road allowance closure fees and application. Comparisons were done of other local municipalities. The shore road allowance closures are slightly lower. The application fee for the shore road allowance closures is slightly lower at the area municipalities. And the cost per square meter is $10.27, which is slightly lower than Huntsville. We're not recommending a change there. I will note that we did reach out to our realtor of record just in terms of the market value, and he said that there is generally a 30% increase in market value. He wasn't able to provide me with a dollar amount, but as a whole, that's what they're seeing. For the road allowance closures, again, the average fee is $871, which is slightly lower than Huntsville at $1,000. And the average cost is $1,107, which is quite a bit higher than Huntsville at $6. Gravenhurst really offset that average at $20. And if we remove Gravenhurst and look at the remaining, we are left with an average of $7.50. So staff are recommending this update. We also looked at where the fees are allocated based on historical information and discussions with finance. We are recommending that the shore and road allowance annual fees go to the Parks Capital Reserve, the license of occupation annual fee to the Parks Capital Reserve, the docks annual fee to the Parks Capital Reserve, and the sale of surplus lands to the Town Capital Replacement Reserve. There is only one change in the current practice here. Currently, the shore road allowance closings are allocated to cash in lieu of parkland, and we are recommending that change. Happy to answer any questions. Sorry, that was a lot.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Questions, Council? Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Worship. This is a good report, but there's one part of it that I'm not quite sure on, and that is the shore road allowance portion of it, which states the fee of $7.50 per square meter, or the appraised value, whichever is less. I'm not sure why we would add that clause. My thought was we would just pick a dollar figure and stick with it, apply it across the board, because the appraisal process in my head is too varying a science. So my thought is to keep it simple, pick a number, apply it across the board per square meter, and be done with it. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. I'd like to hear committee's thoughts on it.
It seems to me that some of the shore road allowance properties are huge, and that's where the appraised value comes in. It would be almost impossible to purchase them, I think, at some point. I don't know, Jessica, do you?
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that the appraisal section is for the original road allowances, not the shore road allowances. And yes, it can be quite pricey if they're buying an original road allowance. And we actually, that is the current practice, to allow the $6 or an appraised value. And quite often I see the people getting an appraisal and going with the appraised value.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Weed?
Sorry, if I can follow up. I guess that kind of drives to the point, which is the appraisal. I still feel that the appraisal process is too murky to make it, to know how to apply like a fair process. I just, that part of it, I just think is I don't know, somehow misleading. I prefer, again, I would prefer to stick to a straight dollar figure and say that it is what it is. That would be my proposal.
Jessica, anything further to add? Do you know even any examples of what some of these road allowances would be in square meters at $6? Just to get a bit of an idea of the scope of what we're looking at, or?
Sorry, I don't have a value offhand, an example.
We can certainly look further into it. We can update this policy anytime we want. So we could look into that further, couldn't we? I mean, even if we approve this today, Tanya?
Absolutely, we can do anything, Mayor Terziano. But if Councillor Weeb wants to make an amendment to remove that section, he can certainly make that.
While you ponder that, Councillor Weeb, I'm going to go to Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Your Worship. I seem to recall that when we revisited this a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and I think we left that in place for agricultural lands, which may have a lesser value and make it more equitable for people that are trying to work the land and be part of the land to have a little break rather than pay the per square meter cost, if I recall correctly.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Jessica, for your report. I'm just going to throw it back at you, Jessica. Didn't you say that's our current practice? And to Councillor Fitzgerald's point, we did discuss it, and I'm assuming that we probably don't have a lot of cases where we actually do have the appraisal versus the square meter. So I'm okay with it. But I am curious. That is our current practice. You're just being consistent with our current practice, and maybe if you could respond to. Do people go through the appraisal process on a regular basis?
Jessica?
Okay, so I just took over this portfolio a little over a month ago, but I am seeing people using the appraised value over. I don't see, Director Maxwell might be still here. She might be able to comment on prior to when I took over this portfolio.
Kirsten.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the majority of people, if it's a significant piece of land that they're looking to acquire, end up going the appraised route instead. Even though there is a fee for an appraisal, the value of the land is always less than the whatever the current rate of per square meter amount is. The difference between the road allowances and the shore road allowance, of course, is that the full 66-foot wide portion is available for purchase, whereas on a shoreline, that amount of land varies significantly depending on the high water mark. So they're usually a significant piece of property that they're looking to purchase, although they're not usually a piece of property that will be considered buildable and would change the value. And I think that's why the appraisal comes in lower normally, if that helps.
Kirsten, before you go, I have another question just slightly off. I noticed in 2019, we adopted a fee for shore road allowances between the Port Sydney Dam and Stevenson 1 at a lower rate than the 13. I seem to recall we had a deputation at planning a few years ago as well about the Muskoka River between the locks and Port Sydney. And did we not reduce the fee for that area as well on the river? Do you recall that, or?
I do, thank you. We didn't reduce the fee in that location because that location still provided access to all of the lakes. Whereas south of the dam, the river, of course, doesn't provide access to anything because it goes from dam to waterfalls. And so there's no additional access. And I think committee felt at the time that it was appropriate to reduce the fee in those locations specifically, but not anywhere else.
Great, thanks. Councillor Stone?
Yeah, I'm tending to agree with Councillor Wiebe. My question is, do you just need one appraisal? Can I get my buddy to write me a nice low one and submit that one, or is there several?
Well, it does say it has to be a professional license, which is satisfactory to the director. So I guess if your buddy's a professional appraiser. Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you again. So I think it goes back to that same question of if, and we don't have the numbers really written in front of us, but if someone were to have a strip of property appraised, it seems as though that strip isn't that valuable until it's transferred to the neighboring owner. Do you know what I mean? So of course it's going to appraise low because, you know, a 60-foot wide strip of land or whatever the width is, isn't that valuable. It's valuable to the neighbor. So I don't know. I'm still not there yet. I'd actually put a motion on the floor to defer it with and get further information and see some of the statistics over the last year on how these values are determined, and if we actually do think it's fair to.
Okay, that actually makes sense. Tanya, can you do up an amendment to defer? Councillor Wiebe will move it, and Deputy Mayor Alcock, are you seconding that? Thank you very much. It does make sense to get some history, because what we're doing is raising the fee from $6 to $7.50, and if we're never using it, we should be looking at it in more depth. I think that's a good idea.
Is it okay if I put it up on the screen, Mayor Terziano?
Yes, please. Thank you. So moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock, be it resolved that Corporate Report Corp 2021-42, license of occupation, original shore road allowance and road allowance closure fees be postponed to the next meeting to allow staff to investigate road allowance fees. Thanks, Tanya. All in favor of the postponement? Opposed? And that carries. I don't have that one. Thanks, Jessica. Okay. Amendment to the procedural bylaw, moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock. It is recommended the committee approves the updates to the procedural bylaw 2019-45 as amended, as outlined in Schedule A attached to Corp 2021-44. And further that, as per the town's provision of notice bylaw 2011-18, notice shall be provided on the town's website of the proposed amendments. And further that the bylaw be forwarded to council for consideration. Tanya?
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. This is just a simple amendment, a couple of matters that we have felt that need changing in order to allow meetings to move along more smoothly. One of the ones is to make sure that we have all information in the agenda package, even from deputies. I believe that was Councillors Withey's request all along, so that was one that we have added. There's about 5 of them there, 6 of them there in the chart, and I'm here. Any questions?
Questions, council? Seeing none, All in favor? And that carries. Okay. Establishing a licensing committee, moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock. It is recommended that committee establish a licensing committee as outlined in Report Corp 2021-43 that will adjudicate and provide a final decision on matters pertaining to the following Town of Huntsville bylaws: business licensing, discharge of firearms, short-term rental accommodation. And further that the licensing committee administrative practices and procedures attached to Schedule A be approved. And further that the amended 2018-2022 Committees of Council Terms of Reference Resolution 286-18 attached to Schedule B be approved. And further that the fee and charge bylaw be amended to include an application fee of $250 per appeal for an A to D inclusive under the newly created licensing committee. And further that the Town of Huntsville appointing bylaw shall be amended to reflect a licensing committee with the following members: Councillor Dan Armour, Councillor Dion Schumacher, Councillor Bob Stone. And further that all applicable bylaw amendments be prepared and provided to council for final consideration. Tanya.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. So this licensing committee arose from recent short-term accommodation rental appeal that had taken place. We had been working closely, Christopher Nagy, Kirsten Maxwell and I had been, and Crystal Peroshi had been working closely with the solicitor during that time, and he recommended that we create a licensing committee on its own, made up of 3 members. We sent all the documentation that attached to this report to the solicitor, and he went through it and approved everything and agreed with what we had. So here, any questions?
Questions, council. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Tanya. I absolutely support this recommendation, but I do a quick question. Do you suspect that, I mean, for the most part, the committee will be dealing with the short-term rental accommodation issues? I wasn't sure how often the discharge of firearms would be considered at this committee, and maybe there are examples and I've completely blanked on what those examples would be for this committee.
Tanya?
So I believe the firearms, and Andrew Stiller is here with us, but I believe the firearms bylaw is fairly new. I think it was only a year or 2 old, so there really hasn't been anything in that regard come up yet. Business licensing now and then, but not very often. But the thought for staff was to make one licensing committee, combine it all together instead of having multiple, multiple terms, multiple people, multiple. So that was the thinking, to create it all together. The taxi and limousine, as I noted, staff are reviewing that bylaw itself, and property standards has to remain on its own. So does that answer your question, Deputy Mayor?
It does indeed. Thank you, Tanya. That's great.
Any other questions? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Worship. So this wouldn't come to council for ratification. Of the committee.
Tanya?
That is correct.
Is that what
the licensing committee makes the final decision. The minutes would come for information only, just like the IEA.
But this resolution today still has to get ratified at council, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. So this is the scope and responsibility of this committee is basically to look after the appeal process, correct? If someone's license is revoked, then they would come to us for this committee, and this committee would look at all the information about it and make a decision after that. Is that correct?
Yes, you would support or once staff pulls a license, if the applicant wants to appeal it, they would come to you. Your decision is final, and then the applicant has an opportunity to appeal to all of council following that. Is that correct, Tanya?
So if there is, and Chris can elaborate even more, but my understanding is Chris is making the decision. And sending out notice or whatever he has decided as per the bylaws that committee sets. And then after that, if an appeal occurred, it would go to that licensing committee where it would be final there. And Chris, if I misspoke, then I'll leave to you.
Chris?
No, that's exactly correct. So staff would revoke the license. Senior staff would review that revoking, and if it's withheld, then any appeal would be held at this committee. So Tanya summed it up perfectly. So, yep.
Okay, all in favor? That carries. Okay, we're at new business, and we have Lakeland Holding update. CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing to report. The report is for information. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from council on our financial holdings in Lakeland? Okay. No new business under operations and protective services, so we are on to development services. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Schumacher. It is recommended that the amendments to the parking control bylaw 2017-66 as outlined in report development services 2021-59 be approved, and further that the bylaw be prepared and forwarded to council for approval. Andrew.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report is pretty straightforward. We're looking at adding in some temporary no parking signage when the digging downtown Main Street construction hits stage 4. As you can see in the map I've attached, the green area would become the detour route. So just to ensure traffic flow, what we want to do is make both sides of each of these roads no parking. And then the second part deals with Payne Drive. Payne Drive is currently signed as a no parking zone. At the request of the new fire chief, we want to take it out of Schedule B, prohibited parking, and put it into Schedule D and make it a fire route, both sides of the road from Center Street down to, and I can't remember the other side of the road, North Dufferin Street.
Okay. Questions, council? Andrew, is this just in place for this year because of the construction, or are these permanent changes?
So thank you, Your Worship. That's a great question. So the temporary no parking would be from, and I did have dates provided by Director Hernan. Sorry, I'm just, July 1st to December 31st. In the off chance that it's the construction is done sooner, the signs can just be taken down. But it is projected that for July 1st that the signs go up.
Okay. And a lot of these changes are over in the vicinity of Huntsville Public School. Will we send them some notification to let them know that that area has changed?
Yep, absolutely, we can do that.
Great. Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Andrew. So yeah, just to clarify, the parking is this year, the fire route is permanent, or is that just this year as well?
No, thank you, Councillor Schumacher. The fire route would be permanent, changing from no parking to a fire route. And then the Caroline Street West, Lawrence Street North, Lawrence Street South, and Minerva Street West would all be temporary, just until the stage 4 construction has been completed.
Okay. All in favor of the resolution? Carries. Thanks, Andrew. But don't go away, because I guess the skateboard and bicycle report. So the first report is just an update on the engagement, correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Your Worship. So as I've outlined in this report, this is for information. We did go to public consultation. I've included the activity that was on the My Huntsville and all the different questions that we that were answered, and the responses. And you can see in the graphs, some were very close, some were not very close. And I just wanted to report on that for the updates that I was asked to do through the public consultation.
Okay. So that was for information. I don't know if I've got a second report, but I do have a resolution. I guess there is a second report. No, it's the old March report. All right, I do have a resolution moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that committee approve the draft bicycle, skateboard, and scooter bylaw attached as Appendix I to Report Development Services 2125. And I have an amendment, if council would like to hear it. Moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the following be added to the end of the paragraph with the following changes. The use of bicycles in a town-owned park would no longer be prohibited. The use of bicycles, scooters, skateboards, inline skates, and hoverboards would be permitted within a town-owned parking lot. So basically, it's the original report with the changes to allow skateboards and bikes in our parking lots. Is that correct, Andrew? Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yes, I believe you, Your Worship, did read that correct. And I believe also attached is a red line version of the bylaw. And if you go to section 2.2, it is totally has been stricken out, where it says it prohibits the bicycle, inline skates, scooters, motorized scooters, skateboard in a town-owned parking lot. So that's now permitted. There's no longer a prohibition on that. And the use of a bicycle is now permitted in a town-owned park, dock, or boat launch area.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Andrew, for the report. I'm a little confused. So the amendment is that apparently I've moved. I'm saying we're suggesting that we now approve the use of bicycles in town-owned parking lots, and skateboards and inline and hoverboards, all of that. That's what the amendment is saying, that we would like to approve that. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, then I do have, if I may, Your Worship, just a follow-up to that. My question is, I know the survey results were really interesting. I'm not sure how we ensure safety if we have people. What if it's a busy parking lot and there are cars coming in and out, and we have, you know, skateboarders and scooters and all of that in the parking lot at the same time? I'm not quite sure how we marry those two. And your comments on that would be really appreciated.
Sure, thank you. So my comments would be what I see is more of a Sunday afternoon when the parking lot's empty and parents taking their kids to the parking lot, not in the middle of the day on a Friday afternoon when it's going to be busy. That's kind of like what my thought was in that process.
May I follow up? Okay, so that's very helpful, but I guess I'm just curious how we govern that, in the sense, do we have hours that kids and others can use the parking lot? Because they may say, well, I'm allowed to use it on weekends when there's no one here, but I don't know how we do that, and how do we police that?
Andrew?
Thank you. I would say, well, when it comes to the policing or the enforcement, it's just a matter of patrols driving around to each different area to see if, you know, the parking lot's being used as it should. when it comes to times or time of day use or weekend use, that's a great idea. I don't know how we would exactly kind of go about that, or how we would. I think we would almost have to post every municipal parking lot to say, bicycles are okay to be used on Sundays, or if there's less than 10 cars in the parking lot. I would hope, and I hate to use this word, but I would hope common sense comes into play, that if it is a Friday afternoon and there is a lot of people driving around and people coming and going from the parking lots, that a parent wouldn't take their child, or an older child, a teenager, would know better. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
No, I'm not sure we can count on that common sense. Councillor Stone.
Yeah, that was my point as well. If we're allowing skateboards and cars to be in the same parking lot, we're opening ourselves to some potential accidents, and I don't think we should be doing that. As much as when there's no cars, it'd be wonderful for a skateboarder to zip around in there, but I think it's a problem for us as a municipality.
Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Worship. I actually tend to default back to the common sense side. I think, for the most part, as long as there is an obstruction of vehicle movements, I don't think it's a problem. I think we're creating a problem where it doesn't exist. It's asphalt. Like we said, kids find it's in an empty parking lot, they're going to want to play around in it. Their chances are they're not going to want to play around in a full parking lot. So I think we have to just take the common sense route and just ease up on the general policing, if you will.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with Councillor Wiebe. One of the reasons we sort of talked about this before is if a parent wants to try to teach their kid how to ride a two-wheeler, that's a good place to utilize to do that, obviously when it's empty and not busy. So I just wanted to make that point as one of the reasons why we were discussing this. Thanks.
Councillor Armour.
I just want to agree with Councillor Wiebe and Councillor Withey. We only have a few parking lots, and I think Dara Howell Way is the main parking lot that you'd probably see bicycles and stuff like that in, but it's a park area, and I think most kids are responsible enough not to go into parking areas that are going to be full of cars. I thought.
Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Yeah, mine's the same agreeance. I would hate to see us be charging $100 to a 4-year-old who's learning how to ride a bike.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. And once again, this is the part of council I really like. And that is when I realize I'm wrong. And the consensus clearly is that we should listen to common sense. And I appreciate the comments from my colleagues on this.
Okay, I'm guessing all in favor of the amendment to allow bicycles in the parking lots. All in favor? And that carries. And so the main motion is amended. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Armour. I read the main motion, so as amended, all in favor. Opposed? Okay, it still carries. Canine pound services. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Withey. It is recommended that a new agreement be entered into with the Muskoka OSPCA for the provision of canine impound services, and further that the agreement enables a recurring annual renewal provided that the costs and terms of the service agreement are satisfactory to the town, and further that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary documentation. Andrew.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report just outlines the changes that were made from the current contract we have with the Muskoka branch of the OSPCA, and quite a few number of changes that we took several months going back and forth with the main office of the OSPCA. One of the biggest changes, and I really wanted to point this out, with section 2.7 was something that they added that we went back and forth about 6 or 7 times changing wording. Originally, the wording in section 2.7 basically said that if the OPP impounded a dog, that we were going to be paying the impound fees, the daily boarding fees, and veterinarian fees on the off chance the dog may have been injured. Now, if the OPP were to take a dog to the OSPCA in Bracebridge, it would be as part of a police investigation. It wouldn't be simply just because of a dog bite. It'd be something a lot more. So we went back and forth, as I stated, quite a few times. And now in the highlighted version of the contract, it says that we have to be agreeable to impound the dog. And sorry, I'm just flipping all my paperwork here. Right, within consultation and upon agreement by the animal control officer, so that's either Corey or myself, of the township, that we would agree that the OPP take the dog in and pay all these fees. So it's going to have to be a pretty convincing argument on their behalf for us to impound a dog for them. Other changes are highlighted. Yep, and I'm here for any questions.
Questions, Council? Councilor Armand.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Andrew. I noticed you mentioned dog for impounding. Would this also apply to things like someone who has a farm and their horses are being contained due to, not feeding them properly, et cetera? Does that fall into the same category, or is this just for canines?
Thank you, Councillor Armour. Through you, Your Worship, this is just for canines. This is dogs only. If there were something more, horses, cows, goats, sheep, whatever, there's a different organization now that would take care of that.
Okay. All in favor of the resolution? Carries. Okay. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock. It is recommended that committee approve the proposed changes to short-term rental agreement accommodation bylaw 2020-91 as outlined in report 2021-47, and further that Schedule D be added to the bylaw 2020-91 as outlined in Appendix I of the report, can be used as a ranking tool to classify the severity of strikes, and further that the bylaw be forwarded to Council for approval. Christopher.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report in front of you today is in response to Council's request to review our enforcement allowances within the short-term accommodation rental program. With respect to this program, Huntsville was a pioneer in establishing the short-term rental, and therefore researchable enforcement restrictions were limited at the time of adopting this program. As committee may be aware, the current bylaw allows staff to use administrative penalties as well as a 3-strike process over a 6-month time frame. The bylaw is also silent on the severity of non-compliance with the bylaw and relating them to strikes. The proposal today is to maintain the administrative penalties associated with non-compliance, create a rating system to the strikes, and reduce the allotted strikes from 3 over 6 months to 2 over the annual license allowance, which is a 12-month period. If a property receives 2 strikes, staff have the ability to revoke the license, and the applicant is given the opportunity to receive a hearing through the licensing committee. The rating of this system, as attached through Schedule D, has been separated into 2 categories, which we feel differentiates between the host responsibilities and the occupants. All non-compliance penalties associated with the hosts are more stringent than the occupants, and staff feel this requirement is appropriate as it enables hosts to address concerns on site and review their own rental procedures for future use. As requested, staff also looked into restricting the number of licenses as well as looked into density restrictions for the bylaw. With respect to restricting the number of licenses, it was suggested that this may lead to a lottery feel to the program and entice people to enroll. In discussions with the municipality who adopted this program at a similar time to Huntsville, they noted that they had not seen as many properties enrolled to their short-term rental program as we have. In addition, staff have also been working with a third party to obtain non-registered host information. So staff can then take a proactive approach to get these properties registered under this program and the MAT. With respect to the density restrictions, staff noted that municipalities that have taken this approach have a heavy GIS backing to their systems. This approach would require additional resources and property information that our municipality currently does not have. Other bylaw amendments included in this report include requiring the MAT tax registration on all applications, adopting the licensing committee, and ensuring that the administrative penalties are relatable to the noted fines. With that, I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Thanks, Chris. Questions, council? Good report, thorough. I like the new system. I think really all we're trying to do is get people to be responsible hosts of their short-term rentals so that they're not a problem to anybody. And I think this will help get us there. As you said at the outset, Chris, we're sort of the pioneer in this. And one of the other things I hope to see maybe within the next month or so is a report that comes back that we deal with the MAP funds from these short-term rentals, because they've certainly been a headache for us. And I think we need to determine what amount of money the town would like to retain from those rentals. So didn't see any other questions, so I'll call a question. All in favor of the report? And that carries. Thanks, Chris. I know that was a lot of work, but it really needed to be done.
Thank you.
Call me slow, Simone, but I finally realized that there's a gentleman named Cameron on the screen, and I'm guessing it's our new Morven, and maybe we should light Cameron up and introduce him to council.
That would be great. There he is. This is Cameron Labonte. He has been with us for, oh gee whiz, Cameron, you might have to jump in here. 4 years?
5 years.
5 years. Okay, I was close. He has been an integral part of our aquatics team already. So he knows most of you, and now you know him, and he is ready to jump in here with some background information about our discussion later today about the buoys at waterfront locations. Yeah, he's going to be a real asset. Thanks for that opportunity.
Thank you, and welcome, Cameron. I should have noticed that quite a bit earlier, but we have so many guests today that you got lost in the shuffle. Anyways, welcome, and nice to put a face to the name. Okay, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Armour. It's recommended that committee deny the request from Huntsville Highlands Muskoka Inc. to have the securities for internal works on a plan of subdivision reduced from 100% to 20%. Julia, are you the lead on this one, or?
I am, but I can't seem to start my video. It says I've been disabled. I'm not sure if
Have to talk to the host about that.
Perhaps I'll let Kirsten go ahead.
Thank you, Julia. So this report, staff were asked to report back following a delegation at the April General Committee meeting about whether or not a reduction in securities for works associated with the subdivision would be appropriate. And there's a bit of background in the report that speaks to how the District of Muskoka does things, how the town of Bracebridge does things. And although the district has a program in place that permits the reduction in securities for water and sewer infrastructure, securities that we collect at the lower tier are for significantly different works. Our securities are taken for stormwater management systems, road construction, street lights, sidewalks, street tree planting, and in some instances, parkland development as well. So our securities are not only for infrastructure items, but also those elements that create the sense of neighborhood. So operations staff also provided several examples of issues that have arisen in the past that led to the town having to complete the outstanding works where no securities were remained to offset those costs. And upon review with both operations and finance staff, we're not recommending a reduction in securities. And both Steve and Brandon and Julie are here to add anything or answer any questions as well.
Julia?
I was just going to add, it's also noted in the report that that the operations department is bringing forward a Huntsville land development standard, and that would be identified in there to what we would be recommending for securities. As Director Maxwell explained, we have had situations where we have had to go back and do works, and when we've canceled or when we've cashed in the securities, there has been insufficient funds to do that work because the securities could be held to for several years. Several decades too. So when we actually go to do the work, it could be completely insufficient to actually do it. So there are cases where we do need to use those funds. So I think for that reason, it's very important to make sure that we are making sure that we are asking that, because in the event there is no developer left standing, we would still have that money there that we could go back to and help to remediate any deficiencies.
Okay. I see Steve and Brandon have both lit up their screens. Do you guys have something to add before I go to questions?
Just to thank you, Mayor Terziano, just to add some real life scenarios to it for council's information. I know a lot of these don't get in front of council, they're dealt with at a staff level. Woodland Heights was a great example. Unfortunately, the developer passed away before he finished the work, and we had to cash securities to complete the road work out there. We have another development in town right now where we've had to deal with the developer into the stage of cashing securities to get it dealt with. And we have two projects going on right now in town through development where liens have been put on town's assets, town's roads, because the developers haven't paid their contractors. Not concerned with it myself because we have securities held. So we can, if this can't be resolved, we'll simply cash the securities and pay the outstanding liens on these projects. There is a mechanism if a developer feels that the fees are too high or too large of a project, and that's always phasing the project. And a lot of developers will phase their project, and that's why you'll see it come in 5 or 6 phases, so they can put the securities up to cover what they require to get the first phase of the project going and then moving forward. So from an operations point of view, we are in total opposition of this, the reduction of development fees, because once somebody buys a home, they expect that road to be finished, maintained, and plowed. And if there's nobody left standing to do it, it would come before council, and it would be a council responsibility to deal with that. So that's why we feel that the securities are there. That's why they're in place. And like I say, it's a common practice, I hate to say it, for us to have to step in and deal with the securities to get projects completed.
Okay. Brandon, did you have anything to add?
If I may, Your Worship. Yeah, so to point out the securities that we take are to protect the municipality in the event that the developer does not, or the developer fails with his obligation. So when they post securities in 100% of the amount, there is milestones laid out in the agreement that those securities can be reduced when they meet those milestones. So we're not holding technically 100% for the whole entire time of them building out that phase. They can get to initial acceptance, which is the first milestone, which therefore they can request a security reduction. What we're finding more and more now is that these phases are getting larger. They've got move-in dates. They want the securities reduced with deficiencies. And that is not a common practice, but that's the point that they're getting at. And once they get occupancy, it's very hard for us to enforce them to go back and finish those deficiencies because we've granted them that milestone. So we've got a certain subdivisions right now where the final lift hasn't been put on for 3 years. It was to be done after 1 year. So there's damage occurring to that subdivision. It hasn't been adopted by the town yet. We are in talks with the developer to say, you need to finish this, you need to fix this. They don't want to fix it. But the securities we have aren't worth the value that it's going to take to fix it today. So in the event that the developer can't fix it and chooses not to because he's met his milestones, that could be a negative to the municipality in order to fix it. Because it's got to that point where we do maintain it through the agreement, but then we need to get final acceptance. So not only do these securities give us that support to get these products, but we also want to assume roads that we should not have to do any work on for the next 20 years. That's the purpose of this, is to make sure that it's built in accordance to those engineered drawings. So with reduction of securities, the way things are going today, we will most likely be drawing from reserves to fix these once they meet their milestones. So I just want to point out the importance of the securities, and that if they achieve their milestones, we reduce their securities. So they have that option, or an alternative method is to reduce the size of their development. So with the size of developments that they're doing today per phases is taking longer than expected. It's not meeting the agreement in the timeline. So for an example, just to touch bases, the subdivision agreement may say initial acceptance is everything but the top lift of asphalt. So all underground utilities, all above ground stuff, except the top lift of asphalt. They have 1 year to complete that. But due to the size of the development, it may take them 2 years to complete it. Therefore, our securities are already out of whack, I guess you could say, that they're not worth that value today. So it's imperative that we look at that and think hard about the 100% and remaining to keep it that way.
Okay, thanks for that, Brandon. Deputy Mayor Alpha, you had your hand up patiently.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Steve, Brandon, everybody, for that. I actually support this report. I know that we were asked by the applicant if we would consider deferring for another month, but I hear what you're saying and I appreciate those comments. But I do have a question. It's a huge concern, and we have a case in point in Huntsville for those who are trying to create affordable housing. And when we asked those developers, well, one in particular, to provide the 100% security, I know at least in one case where it almost killed them. So I'm wondering, and I know at the Housing Task Force in our finance subcommittee, one of the areas that they are looking at trying to come forward with recommendations would be in securities to try and assist affordable housing developers. And I haven't seen their recommendation yet, but I'm really interested to see what they're considering. And I'd love to know what you guys think about what we could do to support those who are trying to bring affordable housing on board. You know, I noticed in our note that Bracebridge, the town of Bracebridge, has the pre-servicing agreement arrangement that helps developers. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Who wants to take that? Julia, I think, has her hand up first, then Steve.
I think I'll let Director Hernan fill in the rest, but just one thing I just wanted to mention is one thing we would look at was the ability to take performance bonds so that the companies could be bonded instead, so that they aren't tying up their cash flow. But I think it's really important that from a risk management point of view, that we are making sure that the companies that we are dealing with are financially stable and are able to finish these jobs and have the cash flows, that sort of thing. So I think that would be really important, but that might be one mechanism where we could look at to see if we can start taking performance bonds instead, so that we aren't tying up their actual cash. It's more of an insurance type of vehicle.
Steve, did you have something to add there?
I certainly don't want to deter from the importance of affordable housing. I recognize the value of it and the need for it in the community. But I will remind you that we do have 2 current projects where there's liens put on right now that we need the securities to clean up the liens. So I'll just leave it at that.
Councillor Withey. You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Just on a comment about performance bonds, they're sometimes very difficult to get, and it's a very onerous process to get bonding, and maybe some of these affordable housing developers aren't in a position to get that, and often instead letters of credit could possibly suffice for that as well. It's just bonding's not as simple as just saying give us a bond. It's quite a process to be able to get the facility up and running for that.
Okay, so our resolution says we deny the request. All in favor? And that carries. Okay. New business. The development on Muskoka Road 3 North, green space. Director Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship. At, I believe it was council in April, I think it might have been Councillor Thompson was asking what we're doing to ensure that there is adequate and sufficient green space for with all the new development that's going on Muskoka Road 3 North. So I have a few maps I'm just going to share, if that's okay, and let you see exactly what it is that we've got in the works so far. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Perfect. So I started with the Settlers Ridge North, which is the northernmost development on Muskoka Road 3. So at this point, we have a stormwater management pond that is town-owned, and the town-owned parcels are highlighted in yellow. And then what the use that is currently or intended to occur in each location. So in this instance, we have the opportunity to put trails in around the stormwater management pond, as well as in this passive parkland block that's behind. All of it is developed now. There's houses the whole way through. And then there's also a developed toddler's playground down at the corner. When and if any development is proposed on the Huntsville Downs property, we would ensure that there's linkages and that any green space that we would be looking at incorporating would also join up with these parcels as well. For Settlers Ridge South and Muskoka Meadows, we have quite significant sections of green space at this point. There's a stormwater management system and trails at the northernmost part. For Huntsville Haven, which we also just had some revisions to last night, there's the significant green space that is developed with trails currently that was part of phase 1 of that development. There is passive parkland that abuts Muskoka Road 3 and would join up with that, that also I believe has trails on it currently. And then there's some stormwater management down further south. The Huntsville Haven development, as I noted, a new bylaw was passed last night that changed the lot layout a little bit and added some green space. So there's green space that would join up to the existing town-owned parcel at the top. There's and one of these, I believe, is going to be a developed toddler playground as well. So there would be a child's playground and then more passive green space going south. And then as well, I also ducked over Chaffey Township Road just to give you an idea of what's over there. So with the subdivision that's draft approved on Chaffey Township Road, there would be a developed parkland portion associated with it. For the Kelsey Madison Court development that is just finalizing, there's a toddler playground that's being developed by or built by the developer. There's also stormwater management parcel that will have trails on it to access this parkland that's all in behind. And then in addition, there's of course on Glenwood, the existing toddler playground. So those are the existing, and as far as I know of, development that will be occurring on Muskoka Road 3 at this time that we have on the books, just for your information.
Thank you for that. It looks like lots of green in there. Councillor Thompson, does that help to answer your inquiry?
Indeed, it does, and thank you very much for that, Kirsten. Yes, it was actually a resident in the first area that Kirsten identified that was expressing concern with regards to green space and connecting trails. But this looks really, really quite good. And question I have is, who would be responsible then for the connecting trails? Let's say, for instance, around the golf course to the new Muskoka Meadows development, that kind of thing. Who's responsible for those connecting trails? Would that be the town's nickel, or would that be the developers?
Through you, Your Worship, it would really depend on what type of development is being proposed, how much land the town would be looking to acquire, and it would be negotiated amongst the developer and the town. I don't know if you recall. Oh, you wouldn't have been there. It was planning committee last week. One of the developers that we were discussing parkland with had noted that he finds it's a selling feature for him to develop parkland within his subdivisions. So he does it over and above what the town's requirements might be. But it's part of, yeah, how we look at development in the first place. There's minimum requirements for everything that we impose through the Planning Act. But I see Director Hernan is there, so I'll speak to it.
If I could jump in, Mayor Terziano, on just sort of make council aware of the fact we've developed a development standard, if you will, for the operations division, which will be at committee next month for review. It has a detailed section of park development, green space development. It's actually what we used when we were dealing with the Muskoka 3 subdivision that you just approved recently, and we were able to negotiate some changes to the park layout. It talks about connectivity. Council's approved the sidewalk master plan and the missing links. So now when a developer comes forth, we ask for their, not only a traffic study, but we ask for a pedestrian study as well as to how the pedestrians will move and what's their proposal for linkage. So we're bringing a detailed package in the month of June for council's consideration. And we hope to use that as our development standard moving forward. It talks about all the things that you're hitting on. It makes sure that the green space isn't unusable lots, that it's good community-based lots that can be developed. It even talks to playground equipment, depending on the number of residents that you're proposing to build. Talks about what sort of playground equipment you need, right up to and includes sports fields if it's a big enough development. So just a little teaser, if you will, but we have an entire package coming next month for committee's review.
Deputy Mayor Alpha.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be really brief. I just want to say thank you for all of those comments and Kirsten for the slideshow. That was great. I was really vocal about how much I appreciated the development that we approved at Planning Committee 2 weeks ago and approved at council last night, because of the fact what you talked about, Director Hernan, that the changes had been made to create some really usable green spaces rather than, as you say, lots that don't really make a lot of sense. They're not big enough to do anything. And I love the use when you talk about connectivity. That's what we've been talking about for a while. And so I am so thankful and I look forward to your report next month.
Okay. All right, that was just for information. But we do have a report for planning, and I have a resolution moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Stone. It's recommended that staff be authorized to advertise for a full-time planning technician position immediately as outlined in report development 2021-64, and further that the existing contract role of GIS technician be extended until the end of March 2022 and included in the 2022 budget. And further that the existing contract role of planning assistant be extended until the end of March 2022 and included in the 2022 budget. And further that any resulting additional unbudgeted costs in 2021 for planning, salary, wages, and benefits be funded through the planning policy and projects reserve. And further that staff be instructed to review fees for planning department services anticipated under the new CPP bylaw process to ensure full cost recovery for application review activities. And Richard, you're going to highlight this ask.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Your Worship. Madam Chair, through you. So the report before you provides information regarding challenges being faced in the town's planning department and staffing needs to address these. The important work being done in the planning department involves the administration of the town's obligations under the Planning Act and implementation of the official plan for managing town's growth in an appropriate manner. The department's existing staff complement, which includes 4 full-time town employees and 2 contract positions, are finding it increasingly challenging to conduct this important function. This is due to a combination of increasing development pressures, application complexity, real estate transaction activity, and general inquiry volumes, which all translate to increasing demands on this small team's time, making it difficult to fulfill all responsibilities effectively. Impacts on the department's ability to effectively deliver quality, accurate service to the community are being experienced. Delays are being experienced by residents and developers alike, and the strains of workload was a contributing factor to the planning department's recent staff turnover earlier this year. Attached to this report are application intake statistics for the past 3 years, a comparison of staffing levels in similar sized municipalities, and an overview of inquiries fielded by the department over the past 3 years. And I won't bother highlighting the recommendations, but I'm here to speak to them or answer any questions you have about them. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Questions from council. Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for that, Richard. And I would just say that I fully support this. I think that this department, any department of development services in any municipality, this really is the bedrock of our economy and how our growth occurs. And so I think that when we're suffering shortfalls and delays, that affects, it touches every aspect of town. You know, early in the meeting, we had a presentation from Climate Action Muskoka, and I was going to wait to speak to it, but I do feel that if we're going to adopt a climate emergency and make some meaningful changes, I think the largest, the lowest hanging fruit, the most bang for our buck is going to be through how we go forward with our built form. And if we're going to make some significant and positive changes with how we do these things, I think we're going to need that support in the planning and development services side of things. So I'm in full support, and I think that this team has done so well with so many challenges, and I'm just so impressed with them. So I'm in full support.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and it won't surprise anybody, but I absolutely emphatically support this. And similar to Councillor Wiebe's comments, I think that our staff has been performing beyond, they've done an amazing job, and the pressures are getting much greater. I think, in fact, if anything, I had a brief discussion with our director about this, and I'm assured that you guys know what you're doing as to who you need to hire. But I also would just put it out there that to Councillor Wiebe's comments, we have other pressures that I think fall on inevitably on the Development Services and Planning Department, and such as if we do something about climate change, which I hope we do, it will need to land somewhere. And so I hope that council is at least open as to how it's going to be delivered. And also, frankly, housing. We don't really have anybody that's dealing with coordinating our housing file. And I know that's a district responsibility, but we certainly are engaged. So I'm an emphatic supporter of this report, but I would actually go further if we had the opportunity.
Councillor Arman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say I support this also, but I think my question is to Richard or to Kristen, actually. Do you think one is enough? the way this town's moving ahead today. Our economy's booming. After the pandemic, we don't know what's going to happen then in our area. So I don't know, is 1 enough, or should it be 1.5 or 2?
Kirsten?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think at this point, we are comfortable with one staff person, additional staff person. Once we have the new community planning permit bylaw in place, and we can see what that workload looks like and what demand there'll be on staff time at that point, then we'll be in a better situation to be able to determine if the resources we have are sufficient or not. So for now, absolutely 1 is what we'd like, but if moving forward, we'll review. Absolutely.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I had the same question as Councillor Armour, knowing the amount of development that's going on in town, and as Councillor Alcock mentions, the pressures that this department is under, all departments are actually under, and I'm just curious too: is 1 going to be enough, and rather than 1.5, maybe 2? I don't know. But anyway, thanks for the answer, Kirsten. I still think we should be looking maybe at expanding that department by maybe another 2 as opposed to 1. Just my thoughts.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good report, and I'm happy to say I'm going to support this. I know how hard everyone's been working and the stress levels everyone's under, so maybe someone can enjoy a weekend.
Okay, I think you guys have the support at the table, and Richard and Kirsten, thanks for holding down the fort through a few really tough months where we did have staff turnover. And hopefully the new staff and a future staffer will help you guys get some downtime. All in favor? All in favor of the resolution? And that carries.
Thank you.
Community services, nothing, but we are at our new business, and the first item is the delegation for the life-saving buoy at Port Sydney Dock. And Simone, I know that this is probably a crossover between your department and Colleen's and Parks. So I would give both of you an opportunity to speak to the request before we go any further.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. We are going to request that we have a little bit of time to do a little homework on this request. There's certainly a cost to supply the equipment to maintain it. It's a change of level of service. We are going to have to consult our insurance provider, as well as we're wondering how many locations we want to consider. So Port Sydney is a busy beach, so is Hutchinson Beach. But we have probably 50 plus, and Colleen was able to identify at least 50 public swimming spaces. So I might request that we bring back a report to council outlining the costs, the change of level of service, and the impact to budgets and staff, if you'll allow us to do that.
Okay, Colleen.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. I'd echo what Simone is asking, that we have some time to bring you back the full information for your consideration.
Okay, I'm going to go to council. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you again, Your Worship. But I'm curious as to what this equipment is all about. I guess when I first visualized it, I'm looking at the life-saving ring that you would throw to attach to a rope. But is this what we're talking about, or what exactly are we talking about with this kind of equipment?
If I may, Mayor Terziano, through you, there is a number of different pieces of equipment that we might be able to look at in order to provide. There might be different equipment for different locations. Certainly the ring buoy that is thrown, Cameron, actually he's sitting on the sidelines here, he can jump on, but he certainly is the expert in this area and will consult some of our other networked municipalities on what they're doing and offering as well. There certainly is the vandalism issue, so, you know, certain spots might need a different piece of equipment. And there's certainly some, they're not anti-vandalism, but there's certainly deterrence to posting some of that equipment. We have to remember that all of our swimming locations are unsupervised. And so then, you know, we also need a conversation with our insurance provider, because once we provide these pieces of equipment to those sites, we need to make sure that we're compliant and not imposing any more risk. There is some risk with vandalization or with these pieces disappearing when people need them. There's also some question about how they are used, and we don't provide training to the general public on how to use them. So if somebody was to go and grab the buoy, throw it into the water, if the rope is missing, it's a problem because they can't pull it back in. So there's also been some issues. So, but you know, there might be different kinds of equipment to look at different locations, and that's probably where we'd have Cameron do a little bit of research.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Simone and Colleen. I guess from my perspective, I understand the logic of coming back with a staff report. I certainly appreciate and support that. But I also think that what we heard this morning was a really compelling argument for something that I do think, you know, Port Sydney Beach is a really busy beach. And yes, there's vandalism, you know, so we replace it. You know, I can't help but think, just in that case, and while you're working on a staff report, I would certainly support moving forward with something at the Port Sydney Beach. And, you know, if we decide something different for all of the other beaches, well, maybe that would be the case. But to me, what we heard this morning was incredibly compelling. And I do kind of think that, I mean, I can think of a lot of, you know, areas in Toronto where they have life rings on unsupervised areas on Toronto Island, actually, and they have life rings. So any place might have vandalism, it might be there, but those beaches are busy. So that's a big city making that choice. And somehow as a smaller municipality, I feel kind of responsible. I just thought it was incredibly compelling this morning, and I would support moving ahead on at least the one at Port Sydney Beach.
I think, Councillor Withey, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I would concur with Deputy Mayor Alcock. I think that this is, you know, this is something that it's very important. And in fact, I feel that the insurance would welcome it because it would perhaps deter or help with potential lawsuits if there wasn't something there. And as far as vandalism, I mean, that's going to happen no matter what, unless you're going to put up some sort of camera system or something, or game cameras even to catch things. Sure, let's do a report, but I do feel that Port Sydney is an important one that we should act on. That's my opinion. Thanks.
Councillor Armand.
Thank you, Worship. Just to chime in on this, you know, I think it's a very important part of any dock area. I've personally seen them used down in Bracebridge at below the river or the bridge when someone was out there swimming and they threw it out and pulled somebody in. But in saying that, if we're talking to Port Sydney, that brings up the whole report thing. Is now we have the town of Huntsville, the docks in Huntsville, which are huge areas for swimming also. So I think the best thing to do is move forward with a report quickly and before the summer weather and the beaches are hit hard by everybody.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate your input into the vandalism, the insurance, everything, and I appreciate the fact that you need to check those things out and get us an answer. But as Councillor Armour just said, summer is actually upon us, so we need to move quickly on this. And even if we're going to do something, if we initially do it at some of our larger and busier beaches and step this up, you know, each year a little bit more. But we do need the answers to the questions, but we also have to keep in mind that, you know, a little bit of vandalism and even some cost isn't worth a life. You know, so we really need to put it in perspective. But the most important thing is we need to move quickly because it is swim season. Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would echo that. If we are able with COVID restrictions to allow for small lessons, our lessons are at Port Sydney Beach and they're at Hutchison. So I would recommend both those beaches if we're gonna start to put into place the two that we do, and Cameron's coming on screen, the two that we do have, and maybe it's an opportunity to teach the ability to use them there.
Cameron?
Through you, Chair Terziano, all of our swim lessons or town programming that happens at any type of beach or waterfront facility is currently a supervised swim area for those participants. So staff come prepared with proper rescue aids that go above and beyond a life-saving buoy or a reaching ring, and they come prepared to prevent any type of emergency that may happen while they are on site. We do not operate supervised beaches, so that's why we currently don't have any reaching poles or reaching assists or throwing aids or signage or any type of equipment that may assist with a public deemed rescue. So that would be the difference between our town run programs and our unsupervised beaches. I am very happy to see that everyone is fully in support of more drowning prevention. So any other information I can provide on that, I'd be more than happy to.
Thanks for that. Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Worship. I do agree with Councillor Alcock. I think we're best served to just act quick on this one. 2 points. One is I believe Hutchison's quite shallow. Every time I've muddled around down there, it seems like it may not, and Cameron can weigh in on it, it may not serve as good a function, but certainly Port Sydney would. And the second part of it is I'd like to see, if we do install them, I'd like to see some bylaw signage that states that any tampering or theft of that equipment would be probably a $5,000 or $10,000 fine. Let's see something like that.
Great idea. Okay, we will expect something back in June and something that's actionable. So if it needs to come to council instead of general, let's do that so that it's finalized. Tanya?
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. So are you requesting, just so I can confirm, are you requesting a motion today?
No, we're asking for the report to come back.
Okay, so can we have a motion requesting it come back?
We have it on video. Is that not good enough?
No.
Okay. Would somebody like to move? Let staff be directed. Oh, we have 8 movers. Take your pick.
Okay, if I can, sorry, just stepping back one more time. So we are not installing anything immediately. We are waiting for this report to come back. Just confirming that's the understanding.
Yes.
Okay. If I can put it up on the screen?
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you. There's 2 motions as per usual, Mayor Terziano, one to suspend and one for the motion.
Moved by Councillor Withey, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock, has recommended the rules of procedure relating to the additions to the agenda where public notice has not been provided be suspended to allow for consideration of a motion for a life-saving buoy at Port Sydney Beach. All in favor of suspending the rules? And that carries. Throw that other one back up. I didn't read it quickly enough. Moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Withey. Committee directs aquatic staff to bring back a report at the next regular council meeting outlining the cost, legal, and maintenance requirements to install vandal-resistant life-saving equipment at all town-owned water access locations, including parks, beaches, and known swim areas. While they can bring back a report on all of it, but we're not necessarily asking to move forward on all of it, so just be clear on that. All in favor of the resolution? Hang on, question, Councillor Fitzgerald.
We asked specifically for vandal-resistant equipment. I think we should just say life-saving equipment, and with the option that we've limited it to vandal-proof equipment. I like Councillor Weeb's allotment with the heavy fine system to deter vandalism rather than vandal-free equipment, because vandal-free, how easily accessible is it for someone who doesn't know how to use it but is trying to save a life there? So I'm just caution the wording.
Put that back up and we'll fix it.
We can remove that, Mayor Terziano, if Councillor Fitzgerald has a seconder.
Yes, he does, Councillor Stone.
Okay. I'll put it back up for you.
Thank you.
So if there is a carried on that motion to amend to remove life-saving equipment, Mayor Terziano?
All in favor of the amendment to remove life vandalism equipment? And that carries.
Thank you. Did I say that incorrectly? My apologies.
Now, the main motion, Councillor Withey, question?
Thank you. Yeah, I thought we were heading towards acting on Port Sydney now before the report, which is what I'd like to see.
I think we need to answer some of the pertinent questions. But the idea is to come back with a report that's actionable next month so that we can act quickly on it. Deputy Mayor Hancock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Councillor Withey's comment, maybe it will come back, the report will come back at June Council with the recommendation that we're moving quickly on Port Sydney, but it seemed to me there was a fair amount of support today to move quickly on Port Sydney. So, okay, as long as that's recognized in the June report, that, you know, I think, I don't know, I felt like there was a fair amount of support for that one today. So,
Okay, Council, let's deal with the resolution on the table. And if somebody wants to put another resolution on to do something specific to Port Sydney, they're welcome to do so.
Okay.
Councillor Fitzgerald, do you have a comment on the motion on the table?
I do. I would suspect that a concerned citizen will have a life ring at Port Sydney Beach this week. So let's leave it at that.
All in favor of the resolution? And that carries. Madam CAO. You're on mute.
Just wanted to note to council that we are sitting at general committee today. So regardless of the direction given today, it wouldn't be ratified by council until the June council meeting. So that's why we prepared the motion so that it goes directly to council so that the decision is final. So regardless of decisions or directions given today, it wouldn't be ratified until the end of the month. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Okay, short-term rental accommodation bylaw. For a second rental on the property. Director Maxwell or Mr. Nagy, I'm not sure. Somebody should probably speak to the impact of making this decision and whether or not we have enough information to make this decision today. Whoever is willing to take that question to start with.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the application or the delegation was submitted subsequent to the Planning Committee meeting that occurred a few weeks ago. The zoning was approved by Council last night to permit a short-term rental use in an accessory structure. So from a zoning perspective, it's now permitted. So it would only be the requirement to have a resolution passed to permit the two short-term rental uses on one property. From an impact perspective, were you looking for sort of an overview of what potential issues could occur on the site? Is that where you were going? Sorry.
Well, I guess I just want clarity. Our policy says there's only one allowed per property. So if we were to allow a second one, we are going to make an exemption to our existing policy.
That is correct.
And I guess I just wanted to know if you guys could add some words of wisdom as to why we do only allow one per property. And then we can go from there.
I think part of the rationale behind only allowing one per property was just to ensure that the type of uses, because I know we had numerous discussions about whether or not a short-term rental accommodation use is a residential use or a commercial use. So from that perspective, we were confident that it was a residential use as long as it was occurring within a dwelling or within a portion of a dwelling. There are some concerns with having two on one site, because then you could have two separate families or two separate groups of people using the property at the same time. And then I think it would lean more towards a commercial use at that point and not necessarily be a residential use. So that's the consideration, I think, that the most significant consideration. And of course, then there's all the noise and other neighborhood concerns that would arise from that.
Okay. Councillor Wee.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess I think with the changes in the rules we're making and making it essentially stricter for the short-term rental licenses, as we heard earlier today, I think I'm more willing to let this one play out and allow them what they've got. It seems as though they've tried it and they've had quite a few guests and very little. I mean, we don't have any complaints on file. So I guess I'm not as concerned about it. I know that there's a bit of precedent setting perhaps happening here, but again, if with the stricter rules that are in place in terms of people, minding their P's and Q's in terms of guests, I actually think we'd be put in pretty good shape. So I'm okay with it. This one.
Deputy Mayor Alcott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree with Councillor Weeb, but I actually was sort of curious why this was so quick to be on our agenda, because after the planning meeting, I had the sense, given there was so much discussion about the zoning approval, but they still needed to go and we needed to talk about our existing policy. And now it's before us and we're talking about our existing policy without the benefit of having a staff report on whether or not this will be precedent setting or when an exemption might be a good idea as today. I don't disagree with you, Councillor Weeb, but I sort of thought there might be a bit more like a staff report on if we are going to change our policy and what the parameters are for that. But now we seem to be discussing the policy today, right now, because of this application. So I sort of feel like it's the cart before the horse, and yet maybe it's a good case where we have an exemption. So I don't know. I wasn't necessarily comfortable that it happened so quickly.
Councillor Arman.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sort of going down with Councillor Weeb on this one. I think this one's unique on its own, and I would like to see us deal with these not so much as a policy, but within a policy, but as individual each time it comes. So it's not set in the present going forward, because I think we need to look at everything differently and how it fits into the Muskoka and how it fits into Huntsville area and the people that come here. So that's just my opinion of it.
Councillor Stone.
I worry that this is precedent setting. There's going to be a flood of applications with people who now are sitting in Toronto making lots of money on their property, and they're going to rub their hands together and say, I can have another one. I would like staff to form some criteria around, you must have a certain size property in order to have a second one. I would like to defer this as much as the applicant would like to have this answer today. And I could get my head around why the second one on that location is okay, but I want more rules, more structure as to why and how we're going to deal with these going forward, because there will be a flood of them, I'm sure. So I will put a motion on the floor to defer this.
We don't have a motion on the floor to pass anything as of yet today, but I have a question for Chris. As per the updated short-term rental policy that we just passed, if a license is pulled, so I'm getting at, say we have two licenses on one property. If a license is pulled on one of the buildings, is it pulled on the entire property? Or
So
would they
to-
be able to operate the other unit?
So to you, your worship, the way that the bylaw is written is that the license is issued to the building itself. So there would be two separate properties, or sorry, there would be two separate licenses. And if one of the buildings there was causing a nuisance, then we would revoke that particular property, or sorry, that particular license, and that would be brought forward to committee. That being said, if it is a noise complaint to a property and we're seeing that both as a whole, both buildings are causing a nuisance to neighbors, then we'd be issuing penalties on both licenses as well, right? So in one way it does go hand in hand, but if one is more bothersome than the other, it would be the one license brought forward to committee. So
I like the uniqueness of their aux box, whatever it's called. I don't know if I said it right, but I like it too. But you know what? I'm not prepared to just sort of willy-nilly pass a second usage. I can see, as Councillor Stone says, the floodgates opening. I can see us having units in garages next, and I think we need to really have some parameters set for any reasons that we would approve a second unit. So I do think we need a staff report. I think we need some parameters set out for considering any second uses of short-term rental. I think, Madam Clerk, we might need to suspend the rules again and do a resolution to ask for a staff report.
I have a motion ready for you, Mayor Terziano, if I can put it up.
Thank you.
This one is the first one to suspend the rules.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Stone. The rules of procedure relating to additions to the agenda where public has not been provided notice to be suspended to allow for consideration of, allow for a second rental on a property under the short-term rental accommodation bylaw. All in favor of suspending the rules? And that carries. A resolution moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that staff be directed to bring back a report that outlines criteria for a second rental property in regards to the short-term rental accommodation bylaw. Questions? Comments? All in favor? Councillor Weed, did you have a question first?
No, it's okay.
All in favor? That carries. Councillor Withey, Settlers Ridge subdivision, air odor concern.
Thank you. I've been contacted numerous times for about a year now by a resident in Settlers Ridge who is complaining about noxious odors coming into the subdivision and disturbing her, her peace, I guess. She can't open windows, et cetera, et cetera. It was determined that that there is a resident across Muskoka Road 3 that has one of those outdoor burning furnaces. And I just don't know. Apparently, I don't know if what to do about it. I know we've looked into it. I believe was it Andrew looked into it? I just don't know what's at our disposal of the municipality, if there's anything to be done about this kind of thing. You know, like it's almost akin to like a noise bylaw or something, that you're disturbing your neighbors. And the issue around these outdoor furnaces is that people are burning anything and everything in them. I remember years ago, somebody contacted me because a neighbor had put one in, and then it had a bunch of old railway ties dropped off that were still had creosote in them that they were going to throw into it. And again, it's more of a question than anything. If there's, I don't know if we can have staff look into whatever the options are, or whether it's a Ministry of the Environment thing, or, you know, I've heard people burning garbage in these things. So, you know, I certainly wouldn't want to see one installed next door to me where I live. And anyways, as I said, I've been getting multiple emails from this poor lady in Settlers Ridge that's, you know, thinking she's going to have to move, she can't stand it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I wanted to bring to the table.
So I noticed that I don't think Andrew's still here, so I don't know, Madam CEO, maybe, oh, Kirsten's going to speak to it. I know it's not against our current bylaw, so.
No, thank you, Your Worship. We, Andrew did look into it quite a bit when we received the complaints. So there are no building permit requirements, no zoning setbacks, and no other limitations that the town has currently in place when we speak about outdoor furnaces. I think this particular property, it's not only an outdoor furnace, but it's also an outdoor water heater. So we have confirmed that the Ministry of the Environment would enforce the type of material being burnt within them, that if they were burning things that weren't permitted, then the MOE would be able to come in and issue a fine. However, because it's an enclosed fireplace idea as well, it doesn't fall under the burning bylaw either. So there have been municipalities in Ontario that have put bylaws in place that regulate the location of them. In some instances, they only permit them in rural areas, for example, where there'll be a certain distance from neighboring properties. But I don't know if that would correct the situation if we did have a bylaw such as that in this instance, because this situation is existing. So there might be grandfathering rules in that regard. But it is something that we have looked into that little bit, and there is some ability apparently to regulate them, but I don't know if it would be effective currently.
Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Kirsten. So have we sent someone out there to speak to this gentleman with his outside burner and let him know that there has been complaints?
We have, yeah, and he is burning things that are permitted. It's always just wood, so.
Thank you.
Councillor Weed?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And part of the problem too is that the chimneys sit much lower than a traditional chimney on a house, right? So they only sit probably 10, 12 feet off the ground. And if a wet log goes in, it's incredible how much, you know, not just steam, but smoke comes off of them. So I can sympathize. I can imagine it'd be very difficult. I don't know if there would be any possible way that we would somehow maybe compel users to raise their chimneys, even if it's, you know, if that one might help. If staff have any sort of, I don't see any other way that we would be able to kind of remedy this situation. So I'm open to suggestions, but I'm wondering if raising chimneys, if that's at all possible in this type of.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you. I think I heard, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Kirsten. So you said the Ministry of Environment went out there and they were fine with what was being burned, because as I think I saw some of the letters and it sounded like there was almost like toxic fumes.
No, to my knowledge, they have not attended that property, but we had received confirmation through previous complaints that they weren't burning items that wouldn't be permitted, that it was really just wood that was being burned. And yeah, that's what we've heard. So if the MECP would investigate something like that, if they thought there was something being burned otherwise, so.
Okay, thanks. Right.
Well, perhaps at this stage, even another visit to the person burning and telling them that, you know, we would like to see them do something to mitigate this, or we may have to look for alternatives to change things up. So maybe one more visit by Andrew to appeal to them. Okay. Council, you saw in your package a request to do a town sponsorship podcast. I don't know whether anybody's compelled to explore this any further for Huntsville. I believe that there are podcasts that you sponsor at $2.50 an episode. And it stays up forever and airs and airs. And I guess I don't know how they find the historian to talk about our town to do one. So I don't know. Is council interested in pursuing this, or seeing Councillor Fitzgerald?
I haven't had the opportunity to look at any of the podcasts produced by this person. Why take the opportunity to do that and revisit it at our next meeting?
Sounds good. I'll try to do the same. Okay, we are at climate change emergency, and I have a resolution moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that the rules of procedure relating to additions to the agenda where public notice has not been provided be suspended to allow for discussion and consideration of a motion regarding climate action. All in favor? And that carries. And Madam Clerk, does our procedural bylaw update deal with not having to do this? It does, right? Okay, good.
Sorry, it does.
This is our last meeting for this. Okay. All right. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that staff be directed to report back with a resolution at the regular June council meeting on the potential implementation of the Muskoka Climate Action Strategy as presented by Climate Action Muskoka to committee on May 26, 21. Deputy Mayor Alcock, would you like to speak to that resolution?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I was looking for the key words in that resolution, which is I'm absolutely supportive of having staff bring it back to the June council meeting. The comments I made earlier, I am supportive of what Climate Action Muskoka, maybe not their methods, but certainly what they're trying to do and what has been done elsewhere in the district, Gravenhurst, Georgian Bay ages ago, Lake of Bays, I think is soon to come. And, but I do think it's really important. So I want, if possible, staff to come back with a resolution that closely mirrors what Climate Action Muskoka tabled with us, but incorporates how the town of Huntsville will be able to follow up. For example, I think the town of Gravenhurst had tasked their environmental advisory committee to follow up and do a number of things. We don't have one of those. So I guess my hope is that staff will think about how we might be able to do this in Huntsville. So that's my request, and I support that resolution if that's what staff is thinking. And I'm looking to our CAO because she's nodding and has been very much involved in this. So,
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I like this initiative as well. However, I'm I think very strong in support of the idea that this has to be a made in Huntsville resolution. And the reason I bring that up is my concerns are with regards to, of course, my department, which is ops. I think the impact in any of our departments is probably going to be greatest in public works. And the reason I say that is because of the vehicles we have and the fleets. Looking ahead in 9 years, there's no question that we have to look at a new building at Medill. And then I'm concerned also about the infrastructure that would be required. I mean, let's say, for instance, that we had a certain percentage that we agreed to should be EVs. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a stretch, I think, to think that we'd have electrically powered snow plows by the year 2030. I mean, it might happen, but it's a bit of a stretch at this point. So I'm concerned about that. The fact that it's not only the vehicles that would be involved, but it's also the infrastructure required to supply the energy to these vehicles that would have to be brought down. So does this mean an enhanced, electrical grid to the yard, that kind of thing, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think the idea is great, and but I really adamant about the fact that this has to be a made in Huntsville solution for sure.
Okay. And I think it will be. If not made in Huntsville, at least made in Muskoka. All in favor of the resolution? And that carries. It's been a long morning, Council, but we have a resolution moved by Councillor Schumacher and seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It's recommended that we do now adjourn at 12:45 p.m.
Jason had his hand up though.
Oh, Councillor Fitzgerald. We don't want to adjourn.
I couldn't hear what happened, and I didn't get my hand up in time to support the last motion. I'm sure that I could see hands, but everything was good. My computer just blank.
It carried without you.
Okay, well, I was in support of it, just so you know.
Okay, then I believe it was unanimous. All in favor of adjournment? And that too is unanimous. Thank you, everyone.